So good morning all. You're all very, very welcome. My name is Elizabeth Heffernan and I'm the Director of Nursing and Midwifery Education in the CNME Kerry with responsibility for Kerry County and Bantry General Hospital. So initially, I would like on behalf of the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education in Kerry and Cork to welcome you to welcome the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland, Dr. Louise Kavanagh McBride, the President, Sheila McClelland, the CEO, and all the team to Tralee. And I would also like to welcome you, the professionals, our stakeholders, our speakers, our invited guests to this NMBI Series, Partnership in Practice in collaboration with the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education, Kerry and Cork. I would like to sincerely thank the NMBI for choosing the CNME in Kerry to co-host the series, which for us indeed is a great privilege. Notably, however, in today's series, education and training initiatives by the staff in the CNE, the CNME in Cork and the CNME in Kerry will be presented. And of course, we will be having our speaker, our new educational lead for the ONMSD, the Office of the Nursing and Midwifery Services Director, Roisin McLaughlin, presenting. I suppose for us in the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education, it is 20 years since they were established, and we look forward today to this wonderful opportunity to present our progress to date and to provide information on our plans for the future. So before we proceed any further, I would like to address some housekeeping issues. So can I ask that you've all ensured that you've signed in so that we can provide you with an attendance cert for the series, which is carrying 3 NMBI Series. Fire exits, all the fire exits are on the right-hand side of the room. All those particular window doors open up. Can I please ask that you put your mobile phones on silence? And the toilets are down the hallway, on the hallway to the restaurant. Tea and coffee and refreshments will be served again at 11 to 11:05. For you that have opted for lunch, lunch will be served at 1:15 to 1:30 in the Park restaurant. And in relation to evaluations, we are not undertaking any formal evaluations today, but we certainly would welcome any informal feedback that you wish to provide, and you can email us at tghschool@hse.ie any feedback that you would like to give us. So finally, I hope you find this NMBI series informative and that you enjoy the opportunity to interact and engage with one another, and in particular with our regulatory body, the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland. So it gives me great pleasure now to invite Dr. Louise Kavanagh McBride, President of the NMBI, to the podium to address you on behalf of the Nursing Board. So Dr. McBride, you're welcome to the podium.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Céad Míle Fáilte, and just to reiterate and to reflect back the wonderful warm welcome that we've got here in the Kingdom of Kerry. I'm going to be very careful now but down here in South, because I know there's border areas and we have to be very sensitive. So I'm not from the locality, so you might pick up I'm actually obviously the President appointed in January of this year, and I was a ministerial appointment to the board several years ago as the HEI, the Higher Education. At the time we were technological institutes, we are now universities, and I see some colleagues down there in the audience. So thank you, Elizabeth, for the very warm welcome. The first thing I had on the agenda was the housekeeping, and Elizabeth has already identified that. So I might add one item to that later on. So as Elizabeth has identified, this has been, you know, very much a follow-on from our very successful summer series last year, and that took place across different locations, facilitated through our HEIs. But following on the feedback and the engagement, we felt that it was very much that we would continue this initiative as a series, but also to involve our partners, our stakeholders, you, our registrants, our nurses, our midwives. Fantastic to hear from Priscilla and Breda and others this morning that we've representation of all disciplines. We've representations of nearly all stakeholders, be you a director of nursing, an assistant director, specialist, patient-facing in the different disciplines, practice development, SALOs, our educational staff. And this is very much about partnership, because as we know, without partnership, we wouldn't have a programme for nurses and midwives as education providers. So delighted, Waterford was the first of the series. The Kingdom today here in Tralee is the second. We'll be going to Galway next week, and then we have another event in Dundalk in November. So the ethos of this is very much to build on the dialogue and very much to build on networking in the localities, offering an opportunity for you as stakeholders in the region to come together. It's probably fair to say that as the president of NMBI and in my full-time job as head of department in the Atlantic Technological University, we've 3 campuses from a nursing with Mayo, Sligo and Donegal. I'm very conscious of the Dublin-centricness of when I was appointed and the travel and everything being very much localised in the Dublin or the Greater Northwest region. So I think it's very important, particularly post-pandemic and post-COVID, that we actually do reach out in the different regions. So it's an absolute honour for Sheila, myself, all the SNMT to be here today to present to you. So just as I said, the optics in terms of the mandate as the new president was very much for the board to come to our registrants, to you nurses and midwives, regardless of what your stakeholder engagement is with regards to partnership and practice. But I just want to draw attention to, I suppose, our profession. And, you know, there may be somebody here, parents in the room, that had Leaving Cert students and offers. So 6 out of 10 students got the first preference offer. We've increased places very significantly, both this side and the other side of the border, with places now in Northern Ireland. And we are competing with huge opportunities and a scope of different courses. So I think each and every one of us as partners have a collective and an individual responsibility of promoting our profession of nursing and midwifery, because there are some concerning trends evolving, and I think you'll all find that. We have a drop in overseas nurses, we have a drop in students taking places on nursing and midwifery programmes, and we are competing with other courses, and we also then have many of our graduates who are travelling abroad. So it's just to be mindful, not of all the obviously focusing on the fantastic things we do, but where there are opportunities and where there are the challenges, how we can actually respond. So I suppose it's important that we just look at the programme. As you see, you've all got a schedule, so it's broken into 4 different sections, and there's a question and answer in each of the sections. Very importantly, to allow you to voice your opinion, to give some feedback, to engage, and to very much for us as the board to hear and take on board that narrative and the dialogue of the challenges and the opportunities and the real issues that are within you as a network here in the south and the southeast. So the one thing I would just add to Elizabeth's housekeeping is the phones are off, the exits, we know where they are, the sun is shining. Just to actively engage and to leave everything behind, whatever it is, whether it's the duty roster or whether it's who's picking up the kids or whatever, and just really try and take this time out this morning, because it's not too many times that we as registered nurses and midwives get the time to reflect and be mindful of what's actually going around. So I hope you really enjoyed the morning. It's very exciting. We kick off with Cathy Ann, who is our operations head, and she's going to take us through a whistle-stop tour of the state of the register. So for the first time in the legacy of the Nursing and Midwifery, we have a live register from a workforce planning that is absolutely key. So it's so important, and it can actually show now where the trends and where the concerns are, and that gives you as workforce planners in your respective posts to actually use now that live data, albeit self-declaration, to actually generate where we need to facilitate. That will be followed by a questions and answers session, and Sheila, our CEO, will actually facilitate that. And then very much the key, the focus is on the middle section then on the CNME, and Roisin McLaughlin, the newly appointed lead in the ONMC, will give an overview and her strategy and her vision. And I, on behalf of the board, want to congratulate and obviously wish her success in her new appointment. And then followed by then looking at the opportunities that you have as registrant here. I was just talking to Daniel and a colleague here in the front row, and it's very much already the narrative, how responsive and how the CNME here in the south actually respond to the service needs and demands of the registrant. So that's fantastic to hear. So we'll have Gillian McCarthy and Daniel, who will give an overview as mental health nurse tutors, followed by Priscilla Lyons and Fanula Hunt, who are special coordinators in midwifery here in the CNME, and then Bernadette Galvin and Elizabeth Myers as special coordinators in nursing. So it's very much about continuing professional development, lifelong learning and postgraduate opportunities. We'll have another question and answer session, and then that'll be followed by queue for morning coffee, and I know there's some here and there's also overflow next door. And then we will also followed by that have Carolyn Donoghue, who's our Director of Education Policy and Standards, who will give an overview of health and wellbeing. So self-awareness, mindfulness, taking time out, being reflective practitioners. And it is busy. We all appreciate and acknowledge, whether we're patient facing, whether we're working in the CNME, whether we're working in autonomous posts as clinical specialists or advanced practice, but it's the importance of looking after ourselves, which is always and should, because we know we can't pour from an empty cup. So the final session then will be fitness to practice. Huge interest in this session on Tuesday, because it's an area that most registrants get very nervous about, but it is very important. While a lot of attention goes through, it's a very, very small percentage of registrants actually go through fitness to practice. But Jan will be taking us through how that process has changed over the last number of years, and how we're trying to minimise and make it more practical, minimising time, reducing stress and anxiety of those that are caught up in that process, because it is extremely stressful for anybody, and whether they're a complainant or whether they're the recipient of a complaint. So it's just to acknowledge that, and then we'll have a wrap-up session. So thank you all. Thank you to Elizabeth and our fantastic team. I really do hope you enjoy this morning. You get something out of all sessions, or indeed the session that you're most interested in. So just relax now and sit back and try and just take on board everything we have to share with you. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. As Louise said, I'm Cathy Ann Barrett. I'm the Head of Operations with NMBI, and I can better Louise. I am from the south, but as people from Cork and Kerry will be familiar with when I say this, I'm from the border. So I am from Cork, but lived in Kerry for years. So I used to always say, I'm not from the county, but I'm from the diocese. So, because I'm from Mill Street. So it's lovely to be back in Tralee. As I said, I lived here for a number of years, and it's interesting to see the changes actually. When I come to Tralee now, a lot has changed. But so what I'm going to share with you this morning is a snapshot of our state of the register. So I'll just take you to my first slide. So NMBI. So first of all, a lot of you will be familiar with us and what we do, but just to give you very quick background on what we do. So we said we're obviously the regulator for the professions of nursing and midwifery, and there's kind of 3 pillars to what we do, and that's what we're going to talk to you about today. One is registration, and nurse and midwives in the room will be very familiar with that, and our annual renewal every year. The second is education, which Carolyn is the director of, and then there's fitness to practice, and Jan will talk about that later. So from the registration perspective, as Louise said, we now collect our data digitally, and we now do our annual renewal digitally, and that has allowed us a really good opportunity to get information about the workforce that's out there, about whether people are practicing, whether you're patient facing, what your workplace county is, age, all of those details, which are really vital for workforce planning, for succession planning, for the wider sector, just to give us an idea of exactly what's happening out there. And now every year when people do their annual renewal, we ask for those details. And last year, for the first year, we published them in what was called the State of the Register. And this year we'll be publishing that again in October. But what we want to do this morning is give you a very first snapshot of the figures that we've pulled for that State of the Register. So the figures that I'll be going through this morning are very much a first cut. And in fact, one of them has even kind of slightly changed since we were in Waterford 2 days ago, because we're analysing them, we're stress testing them. But it's to give you an idea of the very latest information on the register. And then we'll be publishing the full State of the Register in October. So if you want to read more about us as an organisation, our website's there. We recently drafted a new strategy, which some of you may have contributed to the consultation on, and that's available on our website if you want to read about our mission, our vision and our values. So the State of the Register I just spoke about, the data that I'm going to show you here was pulled on the 1st of June this year, so it's very current. The thing about our register is it's always moving, because there is the annual renewal window, but then throughout the year, people are applying, particularly from overseas, to join the register. We have the students and the students joining in the September, October time. So the register, and that's our candidate register. So the register is always moving. So we picked one point in time, June, which is kind of the most stable point of the register, to pull those statistics. And then we're able to now start comparing them year on year. So that's what will be very valuable, I think, going forward. So what it shows us from the 1st of June is that there are now 84,900 registrants on the NMBI register. Of those, 79,400 are practicing, and 5,400 are not currently practicing. Then we ask, are people patient facing? And of the 79,400 that are practicing, 70,900 are patient facing. So as Louise mentioned, it's important to remember that this is self-declared. So it's people's own view of whether they're patient facing or practicing, and we rely on the self-declaration here. So just to do the comparison then to last year's State of the Register, we've roughly a 4% increase in the register as a whole. So it's gone from 81,400 up to 84,900. And then the practicing is about a 4% increase as well. And patient facing is a slightly bigger increase of around 6.7%. So that's what we're seeing in the overall register. Gender breakdown, no surprise to anybody in the room, and even looking around the room, there's really no surprise to anybody. It's still a very female, both professions are still very female dominated. So just the 10% of men there. So, and even less in this room, I think, than the 10%. Age distribution of all current registrants. As you would kind of expect, you have the peak there around 30, 34, and then it goes 40 to 44, it goes down a bit. Again, it's a very female dominated workforce, so you will have some issue, what you'll see coming through there is the reality of life and what people do throughout their careers. The 2,200 on the 2024, this came up as a question when we were in Waterford. Don't worry about that figure. It should be low, because actually when the students come out, it's kind of 18 months before they do their first annual renewal. So that's not that we have very few in that age group, it's just that they're still in the student kind of candidate register and they haven't done their annual renewal yet. And then we have quite a number in the 65 plus category there in the 2,900. So then this is the age distribution of the practicing registrants. So it's pretty similar actually to the overall age distribution. And patient facing. That's your age distribution for patient facing. And this is the comparison you'll see between the different age distributions of the patient facing, practicing and all registrants. This, I want to have a look at the age. Obviously, you'll be familiar with this from your everyday jobs. The number of overseas nurses and midwives on our register is quite large now. Our colleagues coming from abroad, working throughout the country, and it's interesting to look at the age distribution of the overseas applications. So people who are coming in from overseas, and to see that it peaks there at the 30 to 34 age group, and then goes down quite considerably, which, I mean, it makes logical sense that that's where it's going to be the highest for people coming in to the country. So that's the overseas applications submitted. Geographical distribution. So this isn't where you're living, it's where you're working, but again, it's self-declared. So we just ask people to declare where you're working. The geographical spread is pretty much representative of kind of a population basis. So you'll see the biggest numbers, obviously populations and the big centres as well. So you'll see the numbers quite high, obviously in Dublin, and the south is quite well represented there as well in terms of numbers. Just important to note, there are some people who remain on our register even though they're practicing abroad, because they choose to still remain on the register and still do their annual renewal. Now, this is a slide that we thought was very important to put in here, just to give you, I suppose all of this is kind of the basis for discussion today, and to give you the statistics that are there, and then to hopefully that will kind of inform our discussion. So this is the number of individual CCPS applications. So a lot of you will be familiar with this, but if you are a nurse or midwife and you're on our register and you want to travel and practice abroad and join another register, you have to apply to us for a certificate. It isn't a guarantee that you're traveling abroad, but it's definitely a statement of intent. And the important thing about these figures is that these are individual applications, but one person could make several applications. It could go out of date, or they could be traveling through, you know, what we are finding, or what we're hearing from people now is that people are maybe traveling to America and then on to Australia. So there could be several applications from one person, but you'll still see that the increase is quite significant on last year. Now, I just got the latest figures this morning, actually, from our Director of Registration, and that situation has improved a bit in the summertime. So the figures for June, July and August. So as you'll see there, the figures for May are 480. Figures for June are around 370, July 360 and August 260. So it is coming down, but still, because the year overall is going to be a good bit higher than last year. So we as a board, you know, consider this to be an important indicator or something definitely for discussion. We fed it into obviously the HSE, to the department, and to discussions about, you know, workforce planning and what people are going to do in different areas. And we've also done some research ourselves and asked people when they apply for a CCPS, why are you applying for that? And there's some kind of interesting information coming back there, probably be for discussion today, issues around visas and what family members you can bring to Ireland with you. So this is people who perhaps came from, what we're finding now is that, you know, traditionally, I suppose, when you thought about CCPS, it was Irish graduates who wanted to go work abroad. But we are finding now that some of our overseas registrants are actually coming, they're working here for a number of years, and then they're traveling to work somewhere else. And for them, one of the big issues is around visas and the family members that they can bring. But there's lots of different reasons that are outside all of our control, things like cost of living and housing and even the weather. Although today's lovely, so today will be fine. So that's just to give you a snapshot. All of these figures, as I say, are a work in progress from us, and you'll see them all, validated and published in October. But this is to kind of inform discussion today. This is the age profile of the CCPS applications. So there it is. And then this is just a quick snapshot of the divisional registers. I won't go into this because all this detail will be published in October. As you know, we have different divisional registers, and we will break all that down: full register, patient facing, practicing, and you'll be able to see the comparisons on each division from last year. And that's, I suppose, the real richness of the data. Particularly, you'll get a really good, divisions that there's a lot of discussion about: midwifery, children's nursing, and then you see, you can see the increases then in different things like the A&Ps. So that's it. That's the overview of where we are now. As I say, it is a snapshot, and we will have more validated information in the next few weeks. So, we'll be publishing that on our website. It'll be freely available for everybody to see and read. So if you have any questions, Sheila's going to take a quick Q&A.
That's very good of her.
I'm going to pass it over to Sheila.
I think she underestimates maybe the capacity for me to call her back in. Maybe just to give you an overview. So 3 years ago, we brought in my NMBI, and registrants probably found it quite difficult to interact with at that stage, because we had to put a lot of emphasis. It was the middle of COVID. We had to put a lot of emphasis into getting registrants basically just onto the register to make sure that they were legally able to work. And we had to take our eye off overseas applications. We sort of had a build up at that stage of applications, but Cathy and I worked with the department, and we got a huge amount of extra resources deployed because we were seeing an upsurge in overseas. And we were working with the HSE and indeed in Nursing Homes Ireland and other recruiters, and the understanding that post-COVID there was a huge flush of money coming through for recruitment, and we did work. So last year we had nearly 9,000 people applied to come to Ireland and got what we call recognition letters, which is at the first big stage of the process. We really have cut down on the times. You're talking now a couple of weeks from somebody applying from overseas to get that letter of recognition. That means that they can apply for the atypical working visa to come. But I suppose what's a wee bit disappointing for us is that we did all that work last year, and yes, people apply to come, and we as an organisation that is a going concern, we got the fees for that. But those are not turning into registrations. And Louise and Carolyn and I and Ray would be working at an international level, and we are aware that North America is really opening up for overseas nurses. They used to fight amongst themselves about nurses and open up borders and whatever else, and have travelling nurses, and everybody, the nurses were able to make a lot of money, but they've realised there actually there's not enough nurses and midwives, and therefore they are looking now to compete at an international level, which was what we're thinking here. They're intervening, if you like, in a process. Their incentives are being offered. So some people that maybe have got the decision that have chosen not to follow through. There's also, I'm sure you're aware, a delay at the minute in the Department of Justice with the visas. So we're working with them about that. So again, that can slow things up for people crystallising into registrants. So, it is a really worrying trend, that we're beginning to see, both the fact that the people are not turning into registrations in the way we thought they were, and people that are here are potentially looking to leave. So we do have to think smart, and Louise will, I'm sure, reinforce this throughout the day. It is about how we, recruit, train, educate and retain. And I've been saying this to the unions, and sometimes they don't like what I'm saying, but it's like not just our job, but it's the union's job, it's everybody's job to really advocate for the professions, to try to make it as a good an opportunity for people for a lifelong career in Ireland, ideally.
So I think we all need to get behind that. There's no such thing as a bad idea in this front. And we're thinking how we can connect with young people, how we can connect with people who are coming to Ireland and cultural difference, etc. And then how we can retain. And of course, a lot of the work we're going to hear this morning is about really supporting the retention and offering people lifelong learning opportunities. So I'll give some background into some of what you're seeing coming through in the register. Because the register is literally a snapshot of facts, but there's a lot of information that feeds into those facts and a lot of influences. So are there any questions? If you have a question, just put up your hand. And is there well, no, the room's small enough, don't need a mic, but just say who you are and from where you come. Yes.
Sheila, I suppose, can you provide us with any guidance as to how we might improve recruitment and keep people in post?
Well, we had a very interesting lady in Waterford who has done her master's. She's a Nigerian a midwife, and she's done a master's in what she believes are the retention issues. And, some of her facts and the evidence she's developing is about the cultural difference. And there just seems to be more we can do with that. That it, and to me, and then of course, when we're hearing this, we hear it a lot, but it is an interesting one, to bring the extended family, to get, to allow the visa scheme to bring an extended family structure. Now, of course, that mitigates straight against the housing crisis. But even with that, they were saying, we will find accommodation if we thought our parents could come, because then our parents could look after the children. And once we would come here and get rooted, we would absolutely not leave. And she was giving me stats. Now, I think it's quite arbitrary, but she was saying for every 6 that come, 4 might leave if they have no family structure around them, whereas she thinks 4 would stay if there were. So there was a consultation out recently about how we can get smarter about the visa offering. And it was at that point, it was really only asking us and asking anybody that wanted to participate, what other skills do we need? What other skills can we open up and offer visas for? But we were saying we want to go back to the department and say, never mind that, you actually have to be smarter about this proposals in the visa schemes that we have. Because this was one of the big wins we had 20 years ago under Mary Harney. She opened up the scheme about the atypical working visa. And that put Ireland at an advantage. And this is where we're at. We have to compete globally, and we have to think, what's our offer and how can we compete and get better than North America? Because, by the way, they go to North America and realise housing is really chronically bad there too. You have to, and it's like much more spacious, so you're miles from hospitals. So life isn't utopian in America either, but it's just made to look like that because there are these great packages. So we need to get the package, and it needs to be sort of an integrated package of what it might look like to come here and stay. Now, Ray, our director, is hilarious. He says, we'll just up the price of the CCPS, so we'll make it dearer for them to actually apply to leave. So, but like that's what I'm saying, all ideas, put them on the table and we think about them, because some of these things are quite obvious, maybe staring us in the face, but you'll maybe see it and we wouldn't. So it's like, really, we need to think about it. Sorry, yes.
No, and Karen Lennox is my name, Director of Nursing in University Hospital Kerry. I suppose those statistics are really interesting, and what's important about them is that they preempt the problem rather than doing it. And I suppose we can see it's the age of the workforce, and then you're leaving into maternity leaves, as well as housing issues and childcare issues, which impact on the service. But how often and sort of are we taking these to the HSE and the Department of Health, these things like work on the masters or whatever on these issues? Because I think, like as you say, Mary Harney, it's just to preempt them at a national level.
Well, I have worked in the UK most of my working life, and I just am so impressed with Ireland being much more agile. And so we do have a great relationship with the department. And actually, we did take this information to them yesterday. Yesterday morning is a shorter time, and they are going to go to the department for what business owns it.
And justice on the visas as well. So I actually did this presentation yesterday morning for the Chief Nurse's Office in the department.
But that wouldn't be the first time they've heard this. We've been saying this for 6 months. We've been saying from we went to America, and this is all just newly emergent stuff. When we went to America in the spring, where we were hearing about we're open for business here. And we're like, right, that's not good news for us. And we come back and said, they're like really beginning to crank up their recruitment. And they were, yeah. But then all of a sudden we can see the adjustment here. So like, they are really obviously using agencies who are, we think, maybe taking a second cut at the registrant who comes down and they get a fee for that, and then they're taking them on out of the States. So, and we're saying to the agencies, are you doing that? Oh, no, we're not. But we don't know that that's the truth, to be honest. So we are really connected to the department. And I mean, we'd got that increase in staff and an increase in investment for us to make sure that we got those registrants through into the system. It's like 18 months ago. So yeah, we do. We really have a very good relationship. What we haven't heard yet from the HSE is, that they're beginning to lose staff. We're not seeing that happening yet because these CCPS has only been applied for. I suppose the other then end of the process is more students and how we get more people into the education process and out the far side, supported and graduated and onto the register. And Louise is working on a number of really novel initiatives up in ATU, but we're really looking at all sorts of ideas about how we get more people in. We were out last year, we've heard it constantly that there are a lot of HCAs in the system who would love to be nurses and midwives and can't find their way onto the sponsorship programme. So we're trying to find ways to open that up a bit. It's very expensive and we know that. The unions are very pro it, but we know that it's like prohibitively expensive. So are there smarter ways to bring HCAs through? Again, when you're internationally chatting, I mean, the American states along the border with Mexico would have a lot of people coming up and able people. So they have created pathways that they can get, some investment, and then they can get themselves more credentials, and then eventually they can become a full-blown licensed practical nurse or registered nurse. So they're doing that. Like, I think, don't reinvent the wheel. If it's happening across the world, a lot of the states have also said that they are now completely stuck for nurses. So they're thinking migrants are coming in, and migrants are like, we don't want migrants in theory. They're very sort of right wing initially. Then they're thinking, let's have a look at the skills base of the migrants, and could we deploy them because they're already living sometimes in the black economy in these states like New York or whatever. So they're actually thinking, how can we align those people with those skill sets, or upskill them to stay and contribute to the economy. So we have to really think smart about where we get the resources, because the interest in the classic route is going down. The interest, it has been made quite elite and CAO points, and and it's really hard to get into. So all this resonates, and then people think, I just can't get into it. There's no point in me even trying. So we have to think about how we encourage people right across the spectrum to get in, and if they come in with lower points or as a mature learner, that they're supported. And we have all sorts of imaginative ideas about how to do that. And Carmel's nodding there, so Carmel's part of the solution too. Yes.
Just in relation to, it's very obvious that obviously that young cohort, 30 to 34 want to travel, and you mentioned about integration there. Like, could we kind of twin with the Australias and the North Americas to say, look, I'll be sending this amount of staff, and someone from Australia or North America come then during that period, so you're not losing out. So would you say, for instance, 5 go, 5 from Australia arrive here, so, and it's maybe a year or 2 year piece. So they get that out of their system and they're back again. So has that been explored, or is that something you're considering?
So we work with a network of countries, and we've been working on this big project, which I'm sort of a wee bit like lethargic about, which is opening up. So we're all just totally opened up and we all can share. But like I'm saying, America, the standard of the education and the amount of clinical hours, etc., would be much lower, as would America or Australia. But ultimately, that doesn't mean that they're not perfectly good nurses if they've a few years' experience. But I just basically felt, we open up, everybody will leave and we'll not get anybody back. So it has to be more structured. It has to be more of that partnership. So there's a number of things going on, like the Magnet Hospital Initiative that Jonathan's taken forward, and I'm sure some of you are aware of that. And there are great partnerships already and transfer of information and skills across. And also then Australia is always a big draw, and New Zealand. And to be honest, they've already sort of beaten us because they are taking our nurses now. If they're on our register or the NMC register, they can go straight into New Zealand or Australia. So it's already happening. So we have to sort of then just move at pace to say, let's come up with partnerships and rotations. And we're going to Australia now in the first week of October, and we're going to have a conversation with some Irish nurses that are out there working to see what, could talk to them, what would work, and then we can take it and upstage it to at hospital level. And we have got great relationships with the regulator in Australia, who nobody's interested in fighting with each other for resources, but ultimately, make no mistake, if you're in America, and you're talking to colleagues, they're under a lot more political pressure than us. They're told, you get the nurses or else you're out of the job by Friday. So there's a lot more pressure been put on some of these people than we're seeing from our politicians here. Okay. Sorry, there's a lady at the back. Somebody at the back? Yeah.
I was just struck by the figures of the over 50s and how do we make it more attractive to hold on to them?
Yeah.
I was really struck with just really shut down. And these are the brains, really. The experts.
Yeah, and we were talking about that last week. There were conversations about that, saying that can we turn some of them more into advisory roles because they are really rich with expertise, and if they can't be, and from maybe from a health perspective can't be at the front line, can they really be enriching in relation to the advice and support and mentorship for young people coming out? Because obviously, we all recognise there's sort of a brick wall, or not a brick wall, more like a cliff edge that you graduate and then it's like you're on your own. But and that some of that we think is a reason that people don't stay in the profession or leave, or maybe go into other professions that allow them to use their nurse registration or midwifery registration, but don't stay in the practice areas. So yeah, we think again there needs to be, but again it would be through colleagues that we need to find that, because those are sort of local people and we need to find local solutions nearly for those people, because they'll not probably want to necessarily travel.
But Sheila, just
Sorry.
on that point, I think we should mention the elephant in the room, female-dominated profession and menopause in that area. So the issue around job rotation or job enlargement, in terms of rather than losing somebody who's an expert in the relevant area or discipline because of the impact of pre or menopause, and how we can actually facilitate maybe in a different role. So I know Rachel Kenna is very involved and she's an advocate, and so is Nina Phil. So I think we really need to be thinking outside the box in terms of how can we retain those, because what's happening is we're finding quite a lot of people can't stay in the high intensity of the patient-facing position they're in, and they leave and they go to another area, and they're a huge deficit or void. So it's those exact areas and pinch points that we need to be creative, and solutions are better coming locally or within your hospital or within your partnership as such, But I think it is important to mention the menopause. It's very important because, and no disrespect to any of the men in the room, but it is a female-dominated profession, so we need to be addressing it. If it was the other way around, I think would have a lot more focus. No disrespect, Annie. I know we've had this conversation.
This lady in the peach.
Thank you. And thank you. It's absolutely fantastic to have NMBI down in our areas. Siobhan Dunn, Director of Nursing Grants, Tralee, reps in private sector, and we all vie for the same pool of proteins. So it's very challenging at a local level and a national level. But my question to you is that you mentioned there about care assistants and the pathway of care assistants to go forward into nursing. But is there any discussion as to, because no matter what way we look at, we're still short, and even if we increase our numbers with a 4-year gap, is there any discussion in terms of maybe looking at advancing, doesn't matter if it's care assistant or whatever, but another level along there, such as supporters, that maybe it's management of care, and there might be a nurse managing the care, but there might be different levels of people within that structure. In the years gone by, and bring up the role nurse.
Yeah.
We are in a challenge, and I'm challenged, I suppose. I did ask by my management team and everything else. Is NMBI looking at other avenues? How are you going to manage the care? Yesterday, consultants said to me, "You're so short nurses. Are you bringing somebody else in to do it if you don't have enough nurses?" So we're challenged now, because none of us want to lose registrants. We want to keep the registration and the profession of nursing as a line and has increased the numbers, but we have a gap in time to reach that. Has there been any discussions in terms of alternatives or looking at different models of that?
Well, just to make you clear that, you know, it is a democracy, our organisation, and we do have differences of opinion on this. We would have seen, you know, that there's a lot of use in North America of the licensed nurse, which is effectively that level. Obviously, England have brought in the nurse assistant. There's a history in Ireland about apprenticeships. You know, everybody's so pleased that we got to be a graduate profession. So there is a nervousness if we diminish that and have a lesser outcome, maybe a level 6 qualification, etc., that means that in the end the workforce will get diluted and it'll all be those, and the registered nurse at that level, the graduate nurse numbers will diminish, and therefore the quality of care will diminish. So it's a delicate balancing act here. We can see that there probably is room. I think, you know, the less political might be a higher HCA role or whatever, better, higher level qualifications, and it, you know, but there's all sorts of then complications about what gets delegated, who's responsible. So it is a bit of a minefield, but it's turning into a minefield at the UK level quite quickly anyway. So they're a bit further ahead of us, but, you know, most of the hospitals certainly, you know, in the areas of the big conurbations like Ontario and British Columbia and down into, you know, New York, they wouldn't survive without that next level down. And they said there's only one hospital that they knew of, and it was a magnet hospital, and it was very richly resourced, that they didn't have to use that model. So, look, I think it will come. It'll be put on the table, and we'll have to think about it. And also, we are thinking that we should be the regulators of HCAs, and that. But again, it comes up with the same framework about the delegations, because once it's under our pyramid, then we have responsibility for working out the lines of demarcation. But yes, it's on the table. It's tied up in the history. Even, you know, we're talking about apprenticeships, and Minister Harris talks about apprenticeships, but whenever we mention apprenticeships in nursing, no, we're not going back there. But we're saying it's not the same as it was, but people feel somehow that's a diminution in. We would be saying those apprenticeship routes, by the way, you would come out with a degree anyway. Maybe a slower pathway, but it's just, there's a lot of sort of history tied up with how we've got to where we are, and we don't want to blink and diminish it any. Okay, sorry, this lady in the blue.
Thank you. My name is Anne Moran, nurse register coordination in Cork University Hospital, pediatrics. So there are 2 points. First, I suppose not necessarily specifically for an MD, but just with respect to over 50s. I think a lot of our hospitals and that we might have to relook at not just offering a 12-hour shift. A 12-hour shift can become a 13-hour shift, and then in a lot of places, you know, manufacturing breaks and things like that. And I think, you know, just observation in the hospital I work with myself, people, you know, when they get to this stage and, you know, they're looking for other options, not necessarily to leave nursing, maybe to go into the day unit or to go into the, there's only so many, you know, positions there. So then they tend to go, you know, where if they can't, because they just find that the 12-hour shifts have become too much because of where they're at. And again, you know, that's just something I think we need to all reconsider. Can that be incorporated? I know younger people tend to like the 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
We want to keep the expertise and we want to keep the knowledge as well for older. So can something be married, you know? That was one thing. Then just with the education side of things, obviously that's my current role as a person coordinator overseeing students integrated training in Cork University Hospital. So I just feel we do need to increase our numbers. We have increased our numbers in the last couple of years from 20 to 30. And we'd like to increase it further, and we'd like to increase it in the general size, but we are restrained. And one of the biggest restraints, there's a few, you know, restraints, but one of the biggest restraints at the moment is the assessment. For a 4-week placement, there's a CAD document with 8 pages before you even write anything in the document. It's too much. 4 weeks. The first week the student is orientated to the ward. So you have 3 weeks in for performance, 8 pages. And I think, you know, maybe we could look at that and, you know, see how that can be done. And I know my previous roles when I worked Dublin that I'm going to take 2 students. That might be something we might have to do as preceptors. We can't ask the preceptor to do that if they've 8-page document, assessment to do on 2 students. So one, because we do need to look at increasing our student numbers. There's no other way, we're going to get some money in.
Yep.
But if numbers are reducing now from applicants from abroad, but I really think we're in a crisis. We have to do something. We have to sit down and we need to look at, and that's one way that we could increase our numbers.
So you're talking to the right woman, because we are reviewing, and indeed this is an educator here, so I'm sure you see these documents, but also Carolyn, like we as a regulator are moving to much more. Well, they talk about all the terminology with right touch, and that means light touch to some extent. So we're going to be freeing up a lot of the sort of very prescriptive approaches we've taken in the past. So it's outcome focused. Have you got the outcome that you think you should expect? And we'll try to articulate what that would be. And then the documentation should be loosened up. And we will be reviewing that. So Carolyn, do you want to come on that?
Yeah, I suppose it's a good timing in one way. We have the ERB expert review body, we have a work stream looking at undergrad and what the curriculum should be, which the far side of that is the assessment element and the NCAT. And in one way, the NCAT is great. It has, for the first time, the country got together and they did standardisation of how nurses, undergrads are assessed and midwives. So that was version 1, and it's always easy then, once you have version 2, to go on to version 2 and to kind of go, well, actually, we need to fix this, or we need to pull that out, or rejig that, because you're working, it's easier to critique than create in one way. So we're in a good space in that we have the ERB. We're looking at the content of the undergrad curriculum and what way it works, and there's a big piece of research that's due to the report is due at the end of October, the full report. And the early insights from that are very much saying that the clinical assessment for students really needs work, and that the workload on the preceptors is just too much. The students are also feeling that it's very person-centred, in that if you don't get on with your preceptor, you have to, act a certain way to pass, because it's a one-on-one decision. And so there should be a little bit more objectivity around that. And then the over-assessment is throughout the whole feedback. There was a really good graduate survey done on people who literally come out, finished everything, have their pin, and then can give their opinion. So it's very honest, which is what you want. So there's lots of opportunity here. And as you say, these, they've also said that the second year in particular of the programme is a kind of a waste in one way from their perspective from placements. They tend to just go and, get exposure to stuff, but they're not really it doesn't line up to what they're learning. And they can't apply their learning because they're just tipping into different places and ticking boxes as such. So I think this is our opportunity in the next 12 months. Reinvent it. Pull out the stuff that's not working. We as a regulator, as she has said, we're going to really lighten the reins a bit, because 20 years on, the universities and the clinical practice partners, you know what you're doing. You know how to create really good, rich learning environments and how that all works. So, and NTU might be different to UCC and ATU, because you're localising it to the services that you have. That's okay as well. Not every nurse doing their training, or every midwife has to be exactly the same experiences, but it's about learning outcomes. Do they achieve the general principles? And if that's the case, happy days, at the end of the day. And that was the other thing that the students really want, is choice in their undergrad degree, and they feel they get more choice in the type of areas and the types of things that they'll go towards the end of their degree. They're more likely to want to stay and progress their career, because what we're seeing from certainly the younger generations is they're very career focused really from the get-go. They want to be nearly the director of nursing on day one kind of thing, or the CNS or the AMP, and you're kind of staff a little bit. It's just get your feet, and they don't get that speed where we, with our many years of experience, for honestly come a time. So there's lots we can do, and I think in order, as you say, from a crisis perspective, we need to double. There's around about 2,000 first years going in every year. We need to make that 4,000 over the next 5 to 10 years just to keep up. And that's not to really supply sufficiently, but to keep up with 4,000 will be doing okay. So we have to, as a country, be creative. I say, and I think there's so much that, like say you, Anna, and your colleagues, and everybody has ideas. So I think it's a case of just getting those ideas and locally going, let's try this, you know, and just try different things. Some will work, some won't, but in the end, we'll all have moved them.
Just on that point as
Yeah.
well, the role of digitalisation and simulation, because it's about working smarter, not harder. So bringing groups together and doing assessment and reflective and peer review, that is so creative. But whereby we're pinched for surgical or PALS or specialists, you know, we know where the pinch points are, and we actually really role play that or do the simulation. So it is really much about practice development, working in partnership with whether it's UCC or MTU, and trying to make what are challenges into opportunities, because the launch of the digital competency back in May has now the blueprint to allow, you know, as educator and in partnership with our local joint worker to be creative, be flexible, and that light touch regulations where we need to be, rather than the heavy touch, you know. So it is very, very important to not forget we were in a pandemic where everything was online, including service delivery. We were assessing skills online. So it's about getting the balance right, hybrid, and not trying to baby up the bathwater as well, you know.
And on the workflow and work patterns, we're the regulators. We don't have any degree of influence. That's an HR issue. But I suppose we do work with Jonathan Drennan and the Magnet Hospital Initiative, and obviously that's the whole idea. Magnet hospitals are attractive places to work. So it's all of this, like being smart about what's within your capacity to do to make it a really great place for to retain people. And we will be looking, we're not going to be endorsing, but we're going to be trying to sort of reflect the fact that if it's a Magnet hospital, that students are getting trained, and we're expecting to see a richness that's there, and that kindness and empathy and imagination that that's supposed to come with that. So, you know, we can't make hospitals become Magnet aligned, but it's a best in class standard, and that would be some of the things that you'd expect to see in those types of environments. So again, I think Cork is in that, isn't it? Yeah, so you can go back and use leverage and say that would be a good initiative and I think it is to retain staff, so you have to look at all sorts of options. Yeah. Okay, I'm being shouted at. Sorry, and Carmel Buckley is, the boss of the UNMSD in this area, so we have to get her. If she wants to speak, we all have to bow and let her.
Okay,
You make it up and show yourself.
That puts me in my box. Just to note, and I suppose to follow up, Caroline, on your point around the numbers that we're trying to bring in as student nurses, just to say that the OLMSD, we have a group of promotion of the professions, and Lorraine from NMBI, Lorraine Clark Bishop, is a member of that group. And we work very well, I think, the two organisations. We go into schools, to secondary schools, TY, 5th year with the legal arts and Hindi, and the schools, to promote the professions. And it's interesting, your point. I mean, a lot of them ask about how quickly they can be promoted, and whereas we're trying to explain the role of the staff nurse, the staff midwife is valuable, but there are a number of career pathways, and they're often just not aware of them. Their perception of nursing and midwifery comes from what they see on TV. So the questions are very interesting, and we bring in the digital aspect. We talk about simulation. We talk about the different areas that you can practice in, and it is a very worthwhile piece. We also then go into the universities and the technological universities as well. Like next week, I'll be addressing the end of year students now in UCC. And again, these are opportunities we have to capitalise on to ensure that people know what opportunities are out there, what services are there, what funding opportunities are available to us as nurses and midwives, and to work with them.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to say there is work to be done, but we welcome any ideas that people will have about how we can expand this.
Yeah, and we were actually talking yesterday about the midwifery debate, and Sandra was involved in that last year. And, we're saying we should build on that, because if you've got young people in a room that are all talking about midwifery, like, how can we tap into them and say, how can you make it more attractive for the next generation? So, we do have all these sort of stakes in the ground. We just need to join them together and see what we can develop, what will grow as a result. Okay, just the very, very last question.
Just a very quick point. I'm Director of Nursing and Midwifery General Hospital, and we've had 3 healthcare assistants going through the programme. And our, I suppose, the first HCA that went through the nursing programme is now an AMP in our interim.
Brilliant.
And I think there's a real opportunity for us to support that. But they need a lot of support and maybe slightly different to our overseas colleagues. And it's well worth our investment to do that.
Do you want to respond to that, Louise?
Yeah, it's probably a soapbox by Caroline in terms of, I'd say every director of nursing or staff nurse has a healthcare assistant on the ward or setting that would say you would make a brilliant nurse. So it's about alternative routes, not just allowing access and flexibility of how they get in, we support them, but more importantly, how we financially. And that's another piece of work that we have to work with, because we know the mature entrant route is there. We know they can, but their places are very, very limited. So we're just doing a pilot initiative in that area whereby we've identified bursary to sponsor healthcare assistance. So again, it needs to come within the locality. You have to put forward the business case, but that's exactly, it's investing locally in healthcare assistance and offering them that pathway to tell a healthcare assistant that, this person started out where you are and she's an advanced or he's an advanced nurse or midwifery practitioner is absolutely phenomenal. So it's those testimonies we really need to be shining a light on, alternative routes, and as we know, the tertiary access is another opportunity for us to actually, rather than being a lottery, we have a set cohort now that we do year 1 from now to next year, and they have a seamless transition then into the local university, whether it's in Mayo, Donegal or Sligo. So absolutely very, very important that we look at those areas.
Okay, yeah, we need to really move on now. So we'll take this, we'll take it over tea. Would that be okay? Is that all right? And I will have a mop-up session at the end. Listen, thank you very much. Everybody's been so engaged. Once one person starts to talk, everybody wants to talk then, so it's great. So we're now going over to the CNME, and Roisin's going to give us a presentation just at the higher level. And then Liz has a host of speakers, which are all looking totally engaged up here. Thank you.
Let me grab them exactly. No.
You're very behind in time. I have to cut a bit.
I think you might be okay.
Okay, we'll see how we get on. Good morning, everyone. Are you all okay in the room still? Or are you getting a bit hot? Or you want to stand up and stretch? Or are you all okay? Lovely. Well, it's lovely to be in Tralee with you this morning, and I'm really honoured to be here with you. And I want to thank Sheila McClelland, the Chief Executive Officer of NMBI, and her team, and Dr. Louise McBride, for inviting the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education and myself as the new Office of the Nursing and Midwifery Services National Education Lead to collaborate with them on this NMBI Series 2023. So it's a great opportunity for the ONMSD and the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education to be able to share with you our education developments and opportunities for registered nurses, registered midwives and healthcare assistants. So I took up the role of ONMSD Education Lead in July, and this first slide here just shows you the organisational structure of the Office of the Nursing and Midwifery Services Director. So you'll see at the bottom there's 11 centres for nursing and midwifery education, and then we have 8 nursing and midwifery planning and development units and 4 area directors. So I'm very happy to see and welcome Sinead Connery, who is the NNPDU director for this area, and also Carmel, who you've just been introduced to. Carmel Buckley is the area director for this area as well, Cork and Kerry. The National Education Lead, I've highlighted the national leads there in yellow on the slide, and you'll see myself there, the Education Lead, and I will report into Dr. Anne Gallen, who is the Area Director of Dublin Mid Leinster, and then upwards to Dr. Geraldine Shaw, who is the Director of the ONMSD. So this role, I suppose, is a very exciting new development and one which will ensure that education has a strong voice in the future for nurses and midwives. The ONMSD strategic plan from 2023 to 2025, this sets out a very clear high-level direction for the next 3 years in relation to how we will continue to strategically lead nurses and midwives to deliver quality, safe, person-centred care. So key areas of priority to further build capacity and capability will include strengthening education, continuing professional development, clinical leadership and digital competence. And this will lead and enable nurses and midwives to contribute to transforming the future of healthcare that can have a real impact on our population and our communities. So the ONMSD education role is, the first one there is to lead strategically on aspects of nursing and midwifery education, training and continuous professional development on behalf of the ONMSD. So this will include the development, commissioning, implementing, monitoring of education and training as required, and to ensure that the development and increased responsiveness of education services in line with clinical care initiatives. It's also about leading and overseeing and monitoring Quality and Qualifications Ireland, QQI's, Quality Assurance Agreement with the Consortium of Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education. So we started a journey about 4 years ago with 23 centres of nursing and midwifery nationally. This included the HSE centres, the National Clinical Leadership Centre for Nursing and Midwifery, and the 10 voluntary Section 38 centres for nursing and midwifery. And between us, we have worked together and we have achieved accreditation with QQI as a provider of programmes of education from level 5 to level 8 on the National Framework of Qualifications. So with this collaboration, this will promote and encourage collaborative working for the purposes of QQI education and training, and will also be able to share developments in the implementation and the operation of the consortium model, particularly as it relates to programmes, accreditation, learners and services needs. I will also be able to advance the ongoing work with the procurement and implementation of a learning management system. And that was progressed initially by the consortium with Dr. Anne Gallen and Catherine White. So this will include leading strategically on blended learning and facilitating the consortium to expand our scope of provision with QQI as a provider of blended learning or hybrid or online programmes. Along with this also, the ONMSD have recently approved the position of a digital applications officer, and that will be going out as an advertisement in the next few weeks. And we've also developed 4 learning technologist posts, and the closing date for that was the 6th, which was yesterday. So these posts are to support our educators and subject matter experts to develop an extensive and innovative range of local and national programmes. My role is also to promote collaborative curriculum development and standard setting for continuous professional development. So this will include modes of delivery, which will include utilising technology and simulation to support programme delivery. So you're probably all aware of the new simulation lead, which is Dr. Dara Byrne, and she is now in post and she will be leading out on progressing this further. We'll also support the delivery of Department of Health policy, the expert review body in nursing and midwifery recommendations, the NMBI, the HSE corporate and national service plans, the ONMSD service delivery plan and the ONMSD strategic plan. And it is also about supporting effective networking and collaboration and information sharing between the ONMSD, both internally and externally, including our academic, regulatory and professional organisations. So this will involve a communication pathway for communication and engagement that aims to put communication centrally and to capture education on behalf of the ONMSD. Here's just a list of initial key working relationships that I will have nationally, and I'm sure this list will grow exponentially, as I can see already that it is. Our education and continuous professional development. So healthcare is continually evolving with new research, technology and modalities of treatment. So it is crucial for healthcare professionals to keep up to date with the most recent information, abilities and practices given the ever-changing nature of healthcare. So it's about encouraging nurses to question practice constantly, to extend their evidence base for practice and to develop reflective practice and critical judgment to improve performance, which will improve patient outcomes. Nursing education includes embedding a caring professionalism that has patient safety at its top priority, and it respects the dignity and value of service users and carers. So it requires a constant commitment to quality with a willingness to engage with and help. So engaging in continuous professional development offers healthcare providers the opportunity for personal and professional growth while keeping up to date with the most recent developments in nursing and midwifery, providing opportunities for healthcare professionals to acquire new skills, to refine existing ones, to enhance their clinical competence and broaden their knowledge base. So I think by staying up to date with the latest research and best practices, we can offer evidence-based care tailored to individual patient needs, and consequently our patients will benefit from our improved healthcare experiences and better health outcomes. The Office of the Nursing and Midwifery Services Director, the ONMSD, provides a range of options and resources to assist nurses and midwives to continue with their CPD. So this includes our professional development planning framework for nurses and midwives. And I'm delighted to see Breda Kelly from the NMPDU here today with information to share with you all on PDP and that process. And in each NMPDU nationally, there is a resource there to support you with your PDPs. There are sponsorship schemes available from the ONMSD, and there's a range of sponsorships available. For example, for the Nurse and Midwifery Referral for Radiological Procedures Education Programme, for the Nurse and Midwife Medicinal Product Prescribing Education Programme. We also have sponsorship for post-registration psychiatric or mental health nurse education initiative, one for public health student nurses, one for the student midwife recruitment scheme, and we also have the one for the public health service employees to train as a nurse or midwife. There is funding for nursing and midwifery educational programmes, and I think in the last decade in particular we have seen huge growth in the numbers of nurses and midwives who are availing of postgraduate programmes that lead to registration on specialist divisions of the register, like our advanced practice, our nurse and midwifery prescribing and the radiological procedures, and also in the tutors division of the register. There are other opportunities for availing of short programmes. For examples would be like our conferences, individual study days and workshops. And then we have the formal academic programmes, your certificates and higher diplomas, your postgrad diplomas and your master's degrees, which is relevant to your clinical practice. Continuing professional development. So I think by engaging in CPD activities, this will assist us to stay updated, enhance clinical competence and adapt to regulatory changes. It'll foster professional growth and deliver person-centred care. So as healthcare continues to evolve, investing in CPD is essential for healthcare professionals striving to provide the highest quality of care to their patients. So I know Elizabeth and her team, and I'm delighted to see Anne Cummings here from Mercy University Hospital and her team, and the Cork Maternity Hospital, and members of the CNME there, and also our colleagues from Cork University Hospital. I see a few of you down there in the audience. So they're all going to present really valuable information to you on CPD, and again, how you can access that in your region and how this supports to implement and maintain our standards of education for CPD. We've also got very valuable resources within our NMPDU and our CNMEs, and again, local and regional, so it's accessing those. They've got a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and we'll be delighted, I'm sure, to hear from anyone who needs guidance in their career pathways or what is available for them. We have the National Clinical Leadership Centre for Nursing and Midwifery, which is led by Marie Kilduff. And Marie and her team support the clinical leadership development for all grades of nurses and midwives nationally. And they deliver leadership programmes and opportunities for nurses and midwives through leadership development initiatives, through webinars and workshops. We also have the National Clinical Care Programmes, which you're all familiar with, which includes like your emergency nurse and your clinical care nursing. And we then have HSE Land and other e-learning resources for nurses and midwives, so that nurses and midwives can continue their professional development through blended and online learning via HSE Land, as well as other e-learning resources. And you're all familiar with HSE Land as being the HSE's online learning and development portal, and it provides us with really fabulous online resources and learning programmes which have been created to assist nurses and midwives broaden their knowledge and skill. And then the consortium, as I have alluded to earlier, so our primary focus is to work collaboratively for QQI accreditation purposes, which will address the continuing education and professional development needs of your registered nurses and midwives and healthcare assistants and any of the people who support the function of nursing and midwifery roles. So our NMBI, through the scope of nursing and midwifery practice framework, requires that each registered nurse and midwife develop and maintain their competence. Engaging in CPD is seen as essential in order for the nurse or midwife to acquire the new knowledge and competence to enable them to practice effectively in this ever-changing healthcare environment. So to meet the demand for CPD, expansion and extension of the nursing and midwifery roles, the consortium of Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education are going to seek and will seek validation for a broad range of higher education and training programmes, special purpose awards for nurses and midwives at level 8 on the National Framework of Qualifications. And these new programmes will be based on the identified services needs, organisational objectives, and in response to an emerging service priority within all service areas. So currently we have one level 5 programme gone through validation, which is for in medicines management for disability services, and we have just got our first level 8 programme. Well, nearly validated. The 21st of September will be the final pathway for that, but I know we're on track to get it, and that will be the introduction of the psychosocial interventions for nurses and midwives. So we'll be rolling that out as a consortium in the near future. Okay, so and just again about raising the profiles of our Centres of Nursing and Midwifery and the work that we do nationally. We have created an ONMSD consortium webpage, so the link is there to it, but you're very welcome. I'm just wondering, does anybody in the room actually gone in apart from the tutorial staff? Are they aware of this link? So it just really tells you about our quality assurance governance and all our policies and procedures in relation to our education programs is there. So it is, well, I'm very biased because we worked on it, but it is, I think, a really, really useful site for people to access. By being here today and on tour with NMBI, I think it will raise our profiles nationally, and it's nice to have come to locations that we might not necessarily have coming outside of the Dublin and the main cities. So it's lovely to be here in Tralee. We're in Waterford on Tuesday. We're in Galway now on next Tuesday, and then we're going to Louth Cavan Monaghan in November. And then we're with the all the directors of the Centre for Nursing and Midwifery and their teams. We're planning an ONMSD Nursing and Midwifery Education Conference in Athlone on the 14th of December. So anyone who has that interest in education, whether it's your advanced nurse practitioners, your clinical skills facilitators, whoever who have got that interest, we hope to see as many of you in Athlone on the 14th of December. So thank you very much, and I'll hand you over now to Elizabeth and her tutors. Sinead will come over now and help you.
So, that's 3. So these are all in one. Isn't it? The clicker there, if not use that.
Which one? The downward arrow, is it?
Or the clicker, this.
Oh, I'll just do the downward.
Perfect.
Okay. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to very, very quickly set the scene prior to the team presenting on our education and training initiatives in Cork and Kerry. So before I move on, I suppose we need to be clear about the roles of the Centres of Nursing and Midwifery Education. And Roisin there would have identified, obviously, lots of our responsibilities. But just to quickly say, when we were established, our role was to plan, develop, provide and procure education. Identify educational and training needs in relation to our areas with our stakeholders, provide a comprehensive training and development programme, and align that training with organisational, national, international strategies and initiatives, and seek accreditation and I suppose certification. And to date, we would have had, I suppose, CUs from the NMBI, and we've always had, again, level 5 QQI accreditation. But now, obviously, as Roisin has identified, we have moved on, and we're going to be delivering programmes from level 5 to level 8. And like all sectors of the organisation, we have to have systems in place to maintain education, training and financial records. So they're, I suppose, the basic overarching requirements of Centres of Nurse Education. So just to quickly say, these Centres of Nurse Education were established in 2002 and 2006, and that was based on national agreements. However, and I suppose notably, our governance and our reporting structures differ within the CNEs in Cork, the CME and the CNME in Kerry. So in relation to the CNME in Kerry and the CNE in CUH, we report, as Roisin has identified already, the structure to the NMPDU, the area NMPDU, up to the ONMSD, and then up to Colm Henry. In relation to, and that would be that particular graph there, and then in relation to the CNME in CUMH and the CNE in the Mercy, again, very different reporting relationships. So the directors in the CNE and the CME in CUMH report to the Director of Nursing, and then the Director of Nursing reports either to the General Manager, the CEO, and then obviously the South-Southwest Hospital Group. And in relation to those particular centres, the Director of Nursing, who the Director of the Nurse Education reports to, would have a professional reporting relationship to the Group Chief Director of Nursing and Midwifery, and that would be Bridie O'Sullivan here in the South-Southwest Hospital Group. In relation to the Mercy, which is a voluntary centre of nurse education, the Director of Nursing there would report to the CEO and then to the Board of Directors. So why is this important? I suppose when you look at Cork and Kerry, and you try to work together as centres of nurse education, it does provide challenges in relation to partnership and cooperation and resources, because we're again resourced differently, and some of the CMEs have more resources than the other. So these I suppose would be challenges, and they do I suppose, affect how we operate in partnership with one another. But hopefully, with our new educational lead and our new structures in place, that these particular issues will be addressed going forward. However, as Roisin has identified, the centres of nurse education, regardless of whether they're HSE, voluntary, or they're in Cork and Kerry, we're all guided by the HSE corporate plan, the National Service Plan, the National Clinical Care Integrated Programmes, and the national strategies. And my team here will identify those strategies that are governing the education that they provide. And again, we're governed again by the ONMSD strategic plan and the 4 key priorities of that plan. And again, that will be coming through in our presentations. So what I would like to do next now is introduce you to the team, our wonderful teams of nurse tutors and specialist coordinators in Cork and Kerry. So our first presentation will be by the mental health nurse tutors from Daniel Newman from the mental health services, representing the mental health services in CUH Education Centre, Gillian McCarthy representing mental health education in the CNME Kerry. That will be followed by the maternity services. So we have Priscilla Lyons from the CNME in Kerry, a specialist coordinator in midwifery, and Fionnuala Hunt, specialist coordinator in midwifery in the CME in CUMH. And finally, then we will have our general presentation. We'll have Elizabeth Myers from the CNE in the Mercy Hospital presenting, a specialist coordinator in general, and also another specialist coordinator in general will be Bernadette Galvin from the CNME in Kerry. So I'm delighted to be presenting our speakers to us, and we look forward to them speaking. So I'd like to bring our mental health team to the stage.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for that introduction. I hope I don't let you down now anyway.
I have no doubt you won't.
Absolutely. So look, I just want to thank everyone for today and thank for the opportunity to speak here today. I suppose the key message of today's session is about partnership, and I hope from a mental health perspective that we demonstrate today a partnership between the CNEs and the CNMEs in Cork, Kerry, the ONMSD and the NMPDUs and our clinical partners, the Cork and Kerry Mental Health Services and the Cork CAM Services. And hopefully it will provide a holistic picture of what we do. And it's only 10 minutes, so please ask loads of questions afterwards, and we'll hope to do our best to answer them as best as we can within the time allotted. So my colleague Gillian will follow up once I make all the mistakes at first in about 5 minutes, so don't worry, the best is yet to come. And I've now been told I'm so special being a man, so I hope that people mind me, and I hope my colleagues in the room, Fiona and Ger, really wrap me up in cotton wool from now on. So just one key learning from today's session, if nothing else. So the aim of today's 10-minute session is to provide an overview on mental health education. And again, from a Cork Kerry perspective, there was a period of time where issues arose with getting mental health nurse tutors and whatever. And this is about telling our story of building back and building back better, hopefully, and meeting the needs of our services, meeting the needs of, most fundamentally, our service users, the people who use our service, and giving them the best possible experience of care and outcomes afterwards. And upskilling and maintaining our nursing staff throughout their service and career with us. And I suppose this all started nearly 5 years ago. Carmel, and we'll have memories of this many moons ago, and Sinead, that we started on the journey of an education training needs analysis, which was published in 2020. Now, I could go on about this for hours because I lived it for far too long, and Carmel has post-traumatic stress from it. But to put it in brief nutshells, we engage with more than 100 nurses who are registered psychiatric nurses and registered nurses intellectual disability, asking them for their needs. So rather than going to managers and looking from the top down, we looked from the bottom up and see what their needs were from their experiences, from their engagement, from what their patients wanted from them. And from a process of questionnaires and focus groups, we identified at least 20 needs for adult mental health services, CAMS mental health services, and our colleagues in registered nurses intellectual disabilities. And that was a key foundational document for us. And I know other CNEs around the country have engaged with me and with the ONMSD and the NMPDU, looking at this as a role model for them to decide their own needs and define needs and as a training needs analysis. It's available on the ONMSD website as well. It's over 100 pages. It won't put you to sleep, I promise. And I suppose from that I suppose a process of collaboration and partnership developed between mental health and IG services and the ONMSD, and we've developed an education training committee which meets quarterly, so 4 times a year, and it's a unique forum where mental health and intellectual disability management, educators, NMPDU all come together and discuss our mutual problems. And like from reading the minutes and from listening to all the engagement, a lot of the things are themes that we've spoken about today: retention of staff, opportunity, development of the role. You know, how do we support people going from what they are to where they want to be? And I think it has been a unique forum that has really put energy and put focus on mental health and intellectual disability education uniquely, that otherwise may be getting lost. Again, myself and Gillian started on our roles in 2021. Actually, I'm in Tralee today. I did my training in Tralee. I have 20 years starter training next week, so it's a bit of deja vu with me, so forgive the midlife crisis. But it has taken a long time to get where we are. And with myself and Gillian, our practice development coordinator partners, and our area dons that we work with, has been a unique, but I suppose a very fruitful journey that we are able to provide additional services, additional capacity, but also more specialist services and specialist training. And I suppose our vision, myself and Gillian's and our CNEs and our organisations, is to enhance the vision for registered mental health nurses. What they do, how they do it. Since Planning for the Future 1984, our role has dramatically changed. So people would think about the asylum system, but the asylum system has been closed for 20 years. So what have mental health nurses been doing in that transformative change? And how have we adapted our role? And giving people the skill sets, the confidence to say, well, actually, you're doing it right already. Here's the theoretical component. Here's how you go further. And advancing that vision, and I suppose advancing what we do as a specialist division of nursing. And I suppose we're very proud of our own little division, our own little world. I suppose from an educational point of view, how do we support education? What are the drivers of our educational needs? Again, our foundational document in Cork Kerry is the training needs analysis. Also mental health services needs. So for example, from a Cork perspective, the area dons, all the ADONs can just ring me up, which they do too much, and say, Dan, we have had an incident, or there's been a query or a question with policy. What is the educational advice? What can we build a programme around that? That flexibility in acting on need as and when they are required is a key component to what we do. And for example, I walk wards most days, so I'm known by staff. I try to say, I'm just Dan. And it's amazing how people, when they get to know you, just walk up to you and say, look, I'm doing this course. What would you say about this, or what would you say about that? It's that personability of relationships. And in mental health, we're all about the interpersonal relationship. And that applies to staff as well. It's all about who you know. And just being Dan, just going and engaging with staff in that very relaxed manner is a key element of the role, and it enables me to develop programs which meet their challenges and their needs as an educator. As discussed by Roisin, this consortium, and we hope we will be rolling out quite shortly the psychosocial interventions, and my colleague Gillian will be going into that not much further. Again, ONMSD and NMPDU policies and procedures and priorities are key elements to our work. And finally, NMBI registration programs are programs in relation to returning to nurse practice. For example, in Cork, we just had our first return to nurse practice person complete his course. Again, it's a he, so another man in the room, for the first time in 10 years. So it's that opening of doors and saying, well, having that mental health nurse tutor has allowed us to expand that element of nursing, and being, you know, that there is a route back into mental health nursing if you so wish to take it. I suppose drivers of all our policy and education is policies in relation to practice. And I suppose our regulator is different to most nurses' regulators, which is the Mental Health Commission. In mental health, we've had a long history of regulation from the inspectors of mental health back in the day, now the Mental Health Commission. And I suppose the JSF and the Judgment Support Framework, which outlines the bare bones minimum of education. And we support our services in providing that mandatory training and guide them in how it should be developed and support them in any way we can. I suppose NMBI and their requirements, and as Roisin outlined, NMSD and the new consortium strategies. The National Clinical Programmes for Mental Health also outline key priorities from a Department of Health, such as EIP or adult ADHD. Those key fundamental clinical programmes will need to be supported by education, and we try and provide as much as support through that, and also through national mental health policy. So as policy changes, the requirements change. So a Vision for Change brought a new perspective, a recovery-oriented and person-centred perspective to mental health, which is now brought through a Vision for Change. And supporting mental health nurses to deliver a high standard of care in the community is the key element, and engaging in developing CNS roles. So supporting my colleagues in practice development and line managers with the educational and even just the guidance in relation to what education is provided. So, for example, I published to my service just a list of courses that are available in every HEI that I could find on their website in the country, so that people will be aware of the mindfulness PG dip that might be interested in but has a patient need, because we have CNS who deliver art therapies and mindfulness, or in relation to counselling or psychotherapy. So it's not just the core nursing role, it's also the broader role which we as mental health nurses have always enveloped since Paplo, and I won't bore you with nursing theory, don't worry. But it's that different role that we mental health nurses always have possessed, and in supporting the service users, the people that we engage with on a daily basis. So you might be asking, Dan, what are you actually doing? Now, this is only a very short list of what we're up to, but apologies for that. But I'll just go through some highlights. A lot of talk has been already about simulation. And I suppose in May, we supported the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the first simulation session in Cork, Kerry. 6 nursing registered nurses, psychiatric nurses, and 6 trainee psychiatrists were involved in a simulation session in the Assert Centre in CUH in relation to physical and mental health issues, and how does a presentation of a physical health problem differ when someone experiences a mental health issue, or how they interrelate. So that kind of intercollaboration working is quite important, and engaging with HEIs and other stakeholders, because the mental health world is very small. So we need to band together and work together. I work with my colleagues in UL for developing a Level 9 module in risk assessment. Other initiatives we've developed is a CBT 4-day programme, just an introduction, so that people get a taste, and if they want to do the postgrad in wherever that is available, that is an introduction. Also in peer group supervision, we have at least 10 or 15 peer group supervision groups across the services running very well. And also other programs which are very specific to training in mental health, but such as anti-ligature programs, or how do you deal with an emergency with a ligature. And that's the next step of training that we will be developing, that how do we assist a person with ligatures issues and about them, and preventing that using RAID, PBS training, etc., etc. Now, forgive my fatness in the picture, so don't look at me, but this is our first class of our wellbeing star. So this is the first initiative for rehabilitation and recovery services for Cork, Kerry. And it's one of the first in the country to roll out this form of training, where we are rolling out training which outlines the role of the service user and enabling them to be the driver of their care by using a clinically proven, validated tool. And it's a 1-day programme which supports nurses in supporting service users in making decisions about their care. And it's a new way of working. Gillian and myself rolled this out in Kerry, and we'll be rolling it out in Cork at the end of the month. But it's a new way of viewing healthcare that is driven by the patient, not by the service or my role. And it's what the service user wants and how I can deliver that to the best possible way, and using that tool in using that. And there's over 40 stars. So depending on the service user and their needs, you just use a different star, like it may be a domestic violence star or whatever. So it's giving flexibility depending on the problem you face to enable the service user to talk, explore and act. And it's a new way of looking at that. And that has been supported through an initiative by the Cork Kerry Mental Health Services and an innovation funding by Sinead Conair and then NPDU for funding that training. So it's just a clear partnership, example of partnership between myself in the CNE CUH and the CNME in Kerry. And it has been working very well, I hope. I haven't been driving Gillian too mad. Speaking of Gillian, she is now going to continue on and improve this presentation, I hope, and explore more about mental health training.
Thank you, Jen. I obviously know Jen now 20 years because we started our undergraduate up in MTU together. So we've been kind of meeting in career paths with the last 20 years and long may it continue. So thank you. Just to continue on from what Jen has said, I suppose other educational and training initiatives that we get involved in, they do come from different angles for us. So it is from service needs, it is from national needs. So between Cork and Kerry, this would be a synopsis of some of the stuff. I suppose what's unique about Kerry and Cork will be, I suppose, in the approved centre, definitely in UHK here, that we would take on board the iNews version 2. So that's phenomenal from a physical health perspective, that staff are looking out for the deteriorating patient and it's not solely focused on the physical or the mental health side of it. Again, we're trying to promote the physical healthcare in mental health in regards to metabolic disorders as well. So we are offering those programs, and I suppose you'll see nasopharyngeal swabbing. I won't even mention why we had to do that a few years back, but that wouldn't have been a skill that psychiatric nurses would have had to use. I suppose we want to strive and continue to strive to promote staff with education, training and CPD. And I suppose it is a small circle within mental health services, and it is about building rapport and relationships with the directors of nursing, the practice development teams, the staff on the ground, the CNM2s. And I suppose because we've trained in the areas ourselves, that works very well because people know us, they will pick up the phone to us. Another great initiative, so I'll have to give more credit to the NMPDU over here with Sinead and Carmel, is that I suppose what was coming from staff as well is about leadership and wanting to become leaders in the nursing profession. Not just mental health now, we have midwifery, general, public health nurses on our courses, but since September 2021 down in Cork in the lovely Kingsley Hotel, we got trained up, 12 of us as Leo facilitators. So since that, between, I suppose, Kerry, we've over 40 CNM 1s, 2s, 3s trained in Leo, and that's leading an empowered organisation. And Cork so far, they have done over 60. So you are instilling that leadership role within the nurse to carry forward. Now, there will be a niche market because when we've focused on that cohort, we will be going out offering it to the younger staff nurses, and that's a massive thing. And each time I facilitate the program, I absolutely love it, and I learn something new all the time from all the courses I've ever done. It's a 3-day program, but it gives you very practical skills of, you know, having a challenging conversation, for example, or what to do. And the same themes always come up for staff, you know, so it's very relatable. And because it's interdisciplinary, when we teach it as well, there's loads of networking between disciplines, and you know, it's nice. There's a lot of learning in it as well. Okay, so this is as well specific, I suppose, with the Mental Health Commission. We obviously in mental health have regulations that we abide by, and I suppose it's a national issue going on with individual care planning within mental health. So I suppose we had to bring on training and roll it out. So it is one of the bigger training that's happening at the moment. So even as of, I was training 2 days this week, it's well over 300 multidisciplinary team staff that we've targeted on how to meet Regulation 15 when it comes to care planning, and going through all that. And I suppose from every evaluation, the minimum evaluation on it is good to excellent. So that's how valuable that training is. We've moved out from the approved centres now to community teams. And then as well in Cork, which is a massive one, and it came up in the needs analysis as number one request, is risk assessment and safety planning. And even during the week myself, I was getting phone calls from newer staff coming into posts looking for training on it as well. So again, a big cohort of staff there with over 350 again. And you look at, we'd focus on our approved centres, which are our acute centres basically, and moving it on out into the community centres. So not only that we have so much to do in our mental health teaching, but we also have fantastic collaboration with I can mention my colleagues here down in the row, and Dan has some colleagues there in the back as well. Because without them we'd be lost, because they help out with programs like the venipuncture, which is massive now because the undergraduates in mental health, nursing especially, are starting to learn the skills of venipuncture before they even get out in the wards. It wasn't there in my time when I trained, but now staff are coming along. It's been offered. I suppose within maternity services we team up, I suppose, with the local ADAPT centre and facilitate a training on domestic violence and coercive control, which is a fairly hot topic as well. I suppose we're involved in the adaptation programs as well. That would be a big one. The return to nursing programs, anaphylaxis, BLS, and again, one of the newer ones I would have trained in this year, and I'm trying to kind of maybe get it off the ground running to offer it to anyone outside of mental health, would be the mental health first aid program, which is a 3-day, and I suppose that's for anyone in the in general public should be attending that anyway. And then we have our preceptorship as well. So I suppose from following on what Roisin was saying about the QQI, I just had to make a point of saying that it was a mental health content topic that was the first across the line for a QQI level 8, and being involved in the curriculum development, I suppose it was very easy to sell it when you're passionate about your topic. So we're delighted that that's nearly over the line, and that it is mental health. I just have to put that across. I suppose for future planning, we definitely want to focus around the areas of physical health, and we do, I suppose, have a regulation as well with that. Simulation, which has been mentioned, and like Dan had said, again, we'd like to see simulation around physical health needs as well. And to promote, I suppose, skills and knowledge of the psychiatric nurse in that area. Obviously, the QQI level 5 to 8 will be coming down the line, and then anything recovery orientated. And Dan had mentioned just about the outcome star. There's different stars for different areas. It's the wellbeing one we're starting off with, but there is recovery. There is, specific ones for CAMS and specific areas. Okay. So I suppose our recipe for success, from what I've experienced, is I suppose we're good at interpersonal relationships, building and maintaining relationships. That's really important to us, and it has worked excellent. And I suppose the meeting with the committee as well, with all the stakeholders sitting at the table and having those conversations, makes it easy, because anytime we ask for something, we have our rationale, and we usually get what we want. Ideally, we don't ask for too much. And then as well with our clinical side, because we've built and maintained those relationships as well, it is easy to do the job, I suppose. So that is it from the mental health. Okay.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. So my name's Priscilla Lyons and this is Fionnuala Hunt. So together we're going to give you a little overview of maternity, infant and women's health. So I suppose when we talk about maternity, infant and women's health education, there's a lot of progress taking place at the moment in this area. Fionnuala works out at the Centre for Midwifery Education in Cork, and I work here in Kerry. And I suppose there has been huge progression in maternity education, something which we're very, very happy about. Our role here in the CNME and the CME, it's very much developed over the years, with the maternity strategy very much defining the direction of the maternity services here in Ireland. And we have very much welcomed this maternity strategy, and our maternity services are very much seeing a huge change and development at the moment. This has been further supported through the Women's Health Action Plan with a huge focus on listening, investing and delivering. And education and continued professional development is very much part of this. So I think these two documents have very much put a structure on our education programmes, and it's very much supported, and we're looking forward to the continuing of the development of any programmes which we deliver. So we do hope to continue to support and develop and the provision of accessible programmes for all our nurses and midwives, public health nurses that come through our service. It's all about lifelong learning, and we certainly want to expand on all of that. We want to develop and maintain the competencies required for safe practice and effective care. And at the end of the day, our service user is very much the centre of the education that we deliver. We adhere to the standards and guidelines outlined by the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland, and that plays a huge important component in what we do as nurses and midwives. And we would hope that we have a very positive vision for the enhancement of the nurse and midwife role. And I think certainly if you look at clinical nurse specialist and advanced nurse and midwife practitioner roles, it's wonderful to see all of those opportunities there for our nurses and midwives now. And certainly from a women's health perspective, there's huge advancement in this area. And I know certainly I can see some of our colleagues there in the audience today, and it's wonderful to have that expertise. We do live in an area of an ever-changing healthcare environment, and as educators we have a responsibility to keep up with that, and also to make sure that our nurses and midwives are getting the support to learn about that. I would like to give you just perhaps a little overview with regards to maternity services and women's health in Ireland at the moment. So currently there's 19 maternity hospitals and units across the Republic of Ireland. So we're very blessed here in this part of the country between Cork and Kerry. We have Cork University Maternity Hospital and we have University Hospital Kerry. So just to give you a little overview on the two areas, Cork University Maternity Hospital is a standalone maternity hospital. It is on the grounds of Cork University Hospital. Here in University Hospital Kerry, our maternity services is co-located with the general aspect of the hospital, but that adds for huge collaboration and partnership when it comes to caregiving of our service user. Furthermore, if we just look at birth rates, I've just looked at birth rates to give you an idea of the cohort of service user that is coming into our service. And as educators, I suppose the nurses and midwives caring for those come into it. So nationally in 2022, there was just over 54,500 deliveries nationally. That had seen a drop from the year previously, but when you break it down into individual hospitals, that drop was seen in all hospitals. So 2022 University Hospital Kerry, we had 1,131 deliveries, and in Cork University Maternity Hospital we had 6,538. So huge cohort of the service user there that's coming into our service, and we're providing education for. What has guided our CPD in maternity, infant and women's health? I suppose this slide just very much gives you a little snapshot of the models of care and the various documents that have come out over the years in regards to women's health and maternity care. And I suppose I'm very happy to say really that I think when we look at audit and review, it very much drives change. And certainly there's a huge shared learning to be had from a clinical incident review within maternity and women's health nationally and locally. I suppose unfortunately our maternity and women's health hasn't been in the media for all the right reasons in recent years. However, there's huge progress and developments taking place within the clinical area to improve that, and already there has been huge improvements in everything. We have great support from the National Women and Infants Health Programme also. And following on from that, I suppose the last 3 years we've had a huge focus on obstetric emergency training within our units. So certainly the CNMEs and the CMEs are supporting all of that. So we have our practical obstetric multi-professional training. We have our neonatal resuscitation 8th edition programme. We've had Margaret Dunworth from the National Women and Infants Health Programme who has very much supported that. We have our basic life support, our IMUs and our ISBAR, which very much comes into all of our care programmes. And then we have our maternal sepsis. So certainly our development and progress in this area and getting people trained up has been fantastic in all of these areas. And I'm delighted to say that, it has been advantageous as a result in the clinical areas. So I'm just going to let take over.
Thank you, Priscilla. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to speak about the latest initiatives that are undertaken by the CME in CUMH and the CNME in UHK. So the first initiative, and these are just 4 of many, might I say, the first initiative is the Midwifery Adaptation Programme. And this programme was designed and developed for midwives educated and trained outside of Ireland who do not qualify for registration under the EU directive. This programme is facilitated through collaboration between the Centres of Education, our practice development colleagues, and of course the clinical areas. Currently, the Midwifery Adaptation Programme is underway in UHK, and at the moment they have 1 candidate midwife adaptation midwife going through, and in Cork I'm delighted to mention that we are currently only this week in fact have welcomed 4 new midwife candidates from Ghana, and it's lovely to welcome them to the real capital. I had to get that little bit in. Close collaboration with NMBI and the clinical placement areas lends itself well to the success of this adaptation programme. The second initiative I'm going to speak about is the care of women with female genital mutilation, or FGM, within the Irish maternity setting. FGM is recognised internationally as a human rights violation of women and girls. There are 200 million girls and women have undergone female genital mutilation. Education for nurses and midwives is facilitated through collaboration with the multidisciplinary team. And currently, one of my colleagues in the CME, Imelda Hanley, has coordinated this programme. It's being rolled out on the 21st of September. And we are taking a multidisciplinary approach. So we have a team of obs and gynae consultants, midwives, social workers, physiotherapists, counsellors, psychologists, and women's migrant officers. This is available to all of you to enrol on via HSE Land, and we would be delighted to welcome you. It's a half-day programme, and it's accredited with 5 CEUs with NMBI and 5 CPD points with the Royal College of Physicians. The third initiative is Urogynecology Education Programme, which is being rolled out by CUMH nationally on the 13th of October, which is Friday the 13th, but hopefully that will go well. This programme aims to provide and support midwives, nurses, doctors and allied health professionals, helps them to provide quality care to women with urogynae disorders. And again, a multidisciplinary approach is being taken, and we will have experts from obs and gynae, physiotherapy, midwifery and nursing, cervical screening and psychology facilitating this programme. And it does include some parts of the menopause as well. So it is a really good one that we would be delighted again if you could enrol on via HSE Land. It's a 6-hour programme, and it is accredited with 6 CEUs from NMBI, and we are awaiting accreditation with the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland. And the fourth initiative is being undertaken at the moment, and this is being rolled out by collaboration, I suppose, being led by the CME in Cork, but it's being rolled out in collaboration with 5 other CNMEs around the country. So we have educators from Cork, Dublin, Donegal, Mayo and Galway, and it's part, I suppose, it's the, better tell you about it first, it's the uterine involution assessment, a revision for public health nurses and midwives, undertaking maternal postnatal care in the community in accordance with the guideline on maternal postnatal care in the public health nursing service. It aims to provide public health nurses and midwives with the knowledge and skills to assess uterine involution in the postpartum period. And we are presently getting it signed off and getting ready to roll it out. It's going to consist of e-learning firstly, and then a practical skills workshop in participating CNMEs. So what is the future of the CNME and CME in Cork and Kerry? Well, firstly, we want to sustain and build upon our current programmes. And like our other colleagues, we are sending out trains needs analysis to all the clinical areas. Currently in Cork, we've already indicated the staff needs in the outpatients and the antenatal services, and we are currently rolling out the training needs analysis to the other clinical areas in CUMH. Simulation-based education. This is being utilised consistently in the centres, and already Priscilla has spoken about the prompt education, which is a simulation-based education, and this is rolled out on a monthly basis in both Cork and Kerry. And we all know that by watching, by seeing something done, and then by doing it, adult learners are going to learn in a more positive way. The QQI programme development, we look forward to this being developed in both areas, and progress on this is ongoing with gynae modules to take priority. Number 4, we look forward to digital health, and we again are constantly using this in both Cork and Kerry, and this promotes blended learning with the assistance of a learning management system. And finally, increased collaboration is crucial to progress, both within the consortium of CNMEs and CMEs and the clinical area. Finally, I just want to draw your attention to this lovely picture. I can't take credit for this, I'm afraid. It was Priscilla that got the Kerry aspect on it. So this is a tree of life, and it is sand art created by a family who had a positive experience with the health service. The tree of life is a sign of women's strength and endurance. And as we know as midwives, we know how strong women are. And in order for women to be strong, they need the knowledge and expertise of their caregiver. In order for our caregivers to develop as nurses and midwives, then we need to be providing in the CNMEs and CMEs a broad range of education programmes. And to quote our poet, William Butler Yeats, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. So from Priscilla and I and the Centres of Education in Cork and Kerry, thank you for engaging with us.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Elizabeth Myers and I'm here from the Centre of Nurse Education located at the Mercy University Hospital, and this is Bernadette. Bernadette is located and working here at the Kerry CNME. And we're going to provide an overview of the range of courses, obviously, that are provided to address the education, the continuing professional development and training needs of nurses working within our geographical remit. As Liz outlined for us, I'm working within a voluntary CNME, and Bernadette is working within the HSE CNME. And I guess just to provide you with an overview, we work within a large geographical remit, and I think that's important maybe just to highlight that at this point in time. Okay, so these are our buildings, and I suppose before I move on, I just do need to acknowledge that we are very fortunate to have had a purpose-built building, and it's a delight to work in the building. And equally, you can see here the lower picture here represents the CNME located here in Kerry. And when to support our nurses working within our geographical remit, we are providing education and training across a range of services. And obviously, we do address the needs of the acute care service, and within the Mercy CNME, we meet the needs of nurses. We endeavour to meet the needs for nurses working within the Mercy University Hospital, the South Infirmary, and Victoria University Hospital. And for Kerry, they are meeting the needs of nurses working at University Hospital Kerry and Bantry General Hospital. Obviously, from that, then we are of course endeavouring to meet the needs of nurses who are working within the community services. The Mercy CNME supports 13 community hospitals, and Kerry CNME supports 6 community hospitals. I won't list them all out. They're there. We certainly will share the list for those of you that need, but I know those of you within the region are well aware of who they are. And again, the Mercy CNE supports nurses working across the intellectual disability services, and I've just listed just a few of those here as well for you. Of course, our nurses working out there in the primary healthcare settings and have a wide array of educational needs. We do endeavour to address the needs of the public health nurses and the community RGNs working within our geographical remit, and all the school PHNs. Again, there are other nurses working out there in primary healthcare settings. These would include the nurses who are actually working within the primary healthcare settings. It might include a range of different CNSs, nurses who are working as part of the integrated care teams, the ICPOC teams, nurses working with the community intervention teams, and again, the occupational health nurses. And again, there are other groups that we support working out there in the community, and these would be, many would be working continuing care services. These would include nurses working within the HSE nursing homes and the community nursing units. So again, I suppose there are a wide array of courses that we do indeed roll out to meet the needs of that vast array of service of our users. And again, I suppose just to ensure that nurses are supported and fit for their roles, we do provide a range of courses to address their continuing professional development needs. All our programmes, as Liz mentioned earlier, they are of course accredited, be it with either the NMBI, the HEIs or the QQI. And I do think it's worth mentioning that many of our courses actually have an interdisciplinary focus, and more courses are moving in that direction, which is very beneficial because obviously it enhances the communication across a range of disciplines and appreciation of each other's role and the sharing of expertise. I'm not going to go down through each one, but you can see the programmes that we roll out in the various CNEs and CNMEs. I'll just pick out one or two of them there just to go through them. And I guess you can see there, even with the dementia programme, you know, there are an array of courses that we have developed, and I guess this is in response to the needs out there. We have a dementia awareness programme, and we roll that out locally in our own within the Mercy University Hospital, and it's for every member of staff that joins the organisation, and this is to meet obviously, you know, the organisational objectives as well, to make sure it's appropriate care and it's patient-centred care as well. The acute care programme then obviously is to meet the needs of staff working within the acute care sector. Again, there is a special programme, many of you are probably familiar with it, for those colleagues who are working in the primary healthcare settings. And again, all of these programmes actually, I should state, have an interdisciplinary focus. And again, we have a 2-day programme. It's to support staff working in the continuing care settings. And that is called the Enhancing and Enabling Patients Living with Dementia to Live Well. Again, I guess it's worth noting, you know, we've been rolling those out over a number of years, and I guess we've had to try and adapt to the current needs and certainly the changing environment as well. You know, prior to COVID, they would have been very much in-house coming in. During COVID, we were challenged to put a lot of those online. And, you know, we can see, you know, as time moves on, the hybrid model is probably more appropriate for a lot of those. And, you know, we took an innovative approach to try and deliver one aspect of this programme recently, and that was a simulation where we put forward, you know, how you can enhance communication with patients living with dementia. And we use this to showcase one of the innovative approaches we use in our CNME, with our CNE, when we entered for the Sims Award, you know, that was run through the South-Southwest group. And I have to congratulate the team. You know, they pulled it off, coming in second out of 16. I think that was a great achievement because certainly, you know, as you know, we're all very busy in our day-to-day job, and it was just last minute, but yeah, it just goes to show, but it was an interdisciplinary focus, and it just does go to show, you know, when we have the different subject matter experts brought on board, you know, to make it more meaningful equally, you know, for the learners who are attending our programmes. I've just listed out a few other programmes in that the Mercy CNE roll out, and I won't go through each one, but I think it's just a few of them here, you know, just to mention. In particular, I suppose the new graduate transition programme, listening to some of the issues that cropped up here earlier this morning, you know, we can see the importance of our supporting our new registrants. It's so, so important. And this programme certainly, you know, I suppose does provide enhanced support structures when they come through this programme. It's a 6-day programme, and it certainly helps to mitigate against that reality shock that, as we all know, for, you know, that new registrants can are challenged with. Also, it helps to develop, you know, a range of skills and competencies, you know, and again, it's about supporting them with their professional development planning and the different career opportunities that can be available to them. So that's worth noting. Another one of the programmes I think that's worth mentioning here is the diabetes module. We have been, I suppose, in our journey of rolling out that programme is quite long. Actually, we've been doing it probably over the last 15 years. And it's very encouraging to hear the positive impact of that programme. We roll it out in collaboration with UCC. They have accredited that programme for us. It would have been delivered at a level 8. It's a 5-day programme. But to actually hear from the experts, you know, on the ground, you know, right across all the disciplines, the impact that that programme has had actually, you know, out there on the ground, you know, and this is in keeping and supporting the rollout of the National Clinical Care Programme for Diabetes, using the traffic light system model. You know, they are now seeing the benefit of that programme with more appropriate referrals, you know, being made. A lot of the problems are being dealt with now out in the community care settings, primary health care settings, and they're seeing a reduction in the number of, you know, service users that actually need to come in to the acute care service. So, like, that's very encouraging, you know, to see that, you know, equally from our point of view, we don't always see, you know, firsthand, you know, the impact it can have on our service users. And I guess, you know, you can see other programmes there. I guess the Continence Promotion, Continence Management Programme, you know, it's another programme that we find is in great demand. And we know, you know, that, and it's to support our colleagues that are working out there, you know, in community and continuing care settings. It's a huge problem, you know, not just for females, but also for our male service users as well. And there's a huge uptake for that problem. And again, it's I suppose, acknowledging, you know, the emergent needs that are coming up there in service, out there in service as well. So moving on. So a range of different programmes are rolled out across both CNMEs, and they meet the statutory and mandatory courses. And of course, these are very important to support our nurses in their everyday roles. And I know many of you would be familiar with those. This would include the people moving and handling instruction courses, BLS, Heartsaver, people management skills, final journeys, the induction programmes, you know, for all members of staff that join our organisations, as well as the induction programme for our overseas nurses and for our healthcare assistants. And again, I suppose just to ensure, you know, that our nurses are supported and they are prepared to meet, I suppose, the emergent needs that are and top priorities that are emerging out there across the various services. Of course, there's always great demand for the skills-based programmes, and it is so important, you know, that we support nurses in the development of their competencies. Those courses will vary in duration. Many of them might be over a range of over a few hours, to some, you know, maybe being rolled out over 2 days. You can see, I won't go down through each one of them there, you can see what both CNMEs are involved in rolling out. And I suppose, because I'm a long time at the job now, I can see, it was just one that came to mind last night when I was quickly looking over this, and I thought the one that stands out here most of all, it stood out for me anyway, was the IM injection. I remember being asked to develop this programme a way back in response to, the arrival of swine flu, and I thought, gosh, who's going to need that programme, This will be surely phased out within, maybe 3 to 6 months, I thought. Definitely, I said, we won't be needing this anyway, but we'll do it. And to this day, it is still in big demand. And that's the amazing, that's the thing we need to, I suppose, recognise, that nurses need ongoing support to keep pace with their needs, lifelong learning. Evidence does change. And I suppose I'm a long time, as you can appreciate, in nursing. And when I trained, the emphasis was on the dorsogluteal muscle. And I suppose most of you know here now in the audience, it's a no-go zone, really. We say don't use it anymore. If you do need to use the gluteal muscle, it's better you use the ventrogluteal muscle. And again, many nurses, be it both the I suppose the younger nurses as well as the more senior nurses, they do need assistance in helping to identify this and understanding the reason why as well. And it's still one of those programmes, it's always booked up very quickly. And it just really emphasises to me, that journey, it's lifelong learning for all of us, to keep pace with changing evidence. And, we've seen it in relation to wound care, etc. Another one of the programmes, I suppose, other programmes that we've had to develop obviously relate to the extended role of nurses. And, obviously venipuncture, adult peripheral cannulation, I know that was mentioned earlier here this morning. And, supporting patients, to try and get them out of the acute care services, to enable them to return back to their home care or back into continuing care. They need to upskill nurses and to make sure they are competent in both the removal and the insertion of urinary catheters, be it both the urethral as well as the suprapubic catheter, always in great demand. That, of course, is always filled up so rapidly. Again, another one that we roll out locally in our CNE is the neurogenic bowel dysfunction programme. And this, as you can appreciate, would have been a huge trek for lots of nurses to travel from down south up to the National Rehabilitation Hospital to get that skill set and to enable them to develop the competency. And we're very fortunate to have a member of staff, who's quite experienced in this area and who has been rolling out this programme for us. And, it's great now to be able to support our nurses locally, to actually develop that skill set and to enable early transition out of the acute care and to enable those service users to go back to live with our families or maybe into continuing care, be it what is the need at that time. Another one worth mentioning here is the acute life-threatening events, the alert programme. Many of you might have heard of it. Again, this is to support our colleagues, working in the acute care services. I think we're probably the only CNE that's rolling it out outside of St James's in Dublin, but there has been huge uptake for this programme again, and it's about early recognition of the acutely deteriorating patient. And, we have seen great feedback, very positive feedback from this. It's an interdisciplinary focus. And again, we bring in the various subject matter experts to roll out that. So I suppose it's a collaborative approach to rolling out this programme. It's a one-day programme. The earlier part of the day is focusing in on giving them the knowledge, introducing them to the framework, and in the afternoon then we roll out a workshop where we give them actual scenarios. It could vary from, maybe early recognition of someone presenting with pulmonary emboli, a STEMI, or maybe someone with anaphylaxis, and we actually get them to use the framework and tell us the steps that you need to take to prevent further deterioration and management of that. And that has the feedback from that has been extremely positive. And we would hope on foot of that, that we will probably try to address and roll out a programme similar to meet the needs of nurses now working out in the community as well, for early recognition of an acutely deteriorating patient. Okay. And I guess, so moving on, I'm aware of the time is moving. Okay, so I will introduce you now and let Bernadette take over to explain to you the structures that we need to have in place, obviously, and the process that need to be in place to ensure the safe and effective development of competency for our nurses who use our services. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth.
thank you for having me here, and it's lovely to see familiar faces. So I'm going to actually just talk a little bit about the competency assessment in relation to some of our courses. A lot of our courses are actually competency based. So the nurse would actually come in, do the education, so which would be kind of the first step. It might be online education, or it may be knowledge acquisition as part of their classroom session. You've mentioned it before, that the first part of it is actually gaining that knowledge. And then we go into the classroom session and we're developing that actual clinical skills in relation to that competency. So the nurses are developing those skills. And this is really important in relation to ongoing professional development, that we're helping our nurses to actually develop these skills in a safe environment. So we're looking at the technical, practical, and also, very importantly, that interpersonal skills, so that they're developing that, so that when they actually meet the patient, they've developed those skills as to what they need to do and what they need to say. So then I suppose our third step is actually when they've actually achieved their clinical practice and they're actually looking at the skill that they're doing. We'll say it's something like venipuncture and cannulation, and that's a national programme. So it's telling us how we structure that and giving us a skill, a pathway in relation to how we achieve it. We've got a competency assessment document that they then go and they feel supported in the clinical setting to actually practice for a period of time until they feel competent and are then assessed in relation to competency. So it's a very important process in relation to all of it, and that we do support our nurses. We've said nurses are at different levels. I have some nurses that are coming to me to do venipuncture and cannulation, and they've done that for years, yet they're still learning, because they're learning what the national pathway in relation to venipuncture and cannulation is for us. But then I also have nurses that have never done it before. So I suppose there's just a different element in relation to the competency assessment going forward, and different supports for those nurses. They then receive their certification. So they've actually been assessed from a clinical practice perspective, and they receive their certification. And I suppose the important thing that we've spoken about today is ongoing professional development and learning about, if there's new research there and new evidence. We want to ensure that nurses are continuing to develop that, but also they need to assess their own competence going forward in relation to each of those areas. And I think, our profession, our PDP going forward will actually help us in association with that. And also our re-registration in relation to NMBI as well will have an important effect. I suppose this was just a snapshot. Now, this is very, very small little snapshot of, we'll say, looking at the IV medication administration, which would be one of our competency-based assessment processes in relation to the course. So they would come in, they do some online learning, they come in, they learn about the theory, and they do some practical work in the afternoon. And basically, this is a 3-month, so we expect them to actually have their IV certification completed at the end of 3 months. Now, this is up to June, so you can imagine they would have had 3 months to complete this. So maybe some of them haven't actually submitted their forms, but you can see there's 2/3 of them have actually achieved their certification. Which is quite good, because some of those forms may have actually been sent back to them because they hadn't completed them correctly. There may be prerequisites. Some of these, in our for our IV medication, we require that they have completed anaphylaxis. Maybe they haven't done that part of the course, and they've done their competency development. They haven't done that element of it. So I suppose the important element of it all is that once they go out and they do their competency and develop their skills, is that they receive their certification. But I suppose there's risks associated with that for organisations. So you may have a staff member that's completed the theoretical component and all aspects of it, done the skill element of it, but maybe has not completed the supervision element of it. So I suppose from a risk perspective for patients, because that's at the end of the day, it's patient safety, is that we need to consider this as organisations from an education perspective, but also from the service areas. So it's really just highlighting those facts, that there are risks associated with ongoing professional development as well. I suppose there is our scope of practice, and I suppose that's our guiding framework and our code of professional conduct and ethics. But we all are accountable, including, we'll say, organisations. It's also the individuals, and maintaining that competence going forward. I suppose for us in Kerry and in Bantry, which is the areas that we would have a lot of our nurses in relation to IV medications, we would link closely with the nurse practice development coordinators. And I suppose we've changed some of our practices in relation to this in recent times. So we provide them with data in relation to who has completed their courses. So who has actually been certified? So they can then go back to those clinical areas and ask them, is there any particular reason for that particular staff member not achieving competence? So that's an important element from the safety perspective. I suppose we've changed our recording of our certification. So previously we would have anyone that attended training and then anyone who would have received their certificate. So now we actually combine those so that we can very clearly see the percentage of staff that maybe are not achieving it. And I suppose ways that we're looking at it as well is in relation to, say, suprapubic catheters. So we'll give them reminders that they're coming up through the HSE land, which is a very good resource. So we remind them that they're actually coming up to their timeline in relation they should have submitted their certification. So these things are new changes, but it's very much collaboration is hugely important. So I'm here being told now my time is running out, so I think you all want tea and coffee. So here is just in relation to competency assessment, just in relation to venipuncture and cannulation. And I suppose, it's quite stark, the number of staff that actually haven't achieved their certification in relation to these two particular areas. And I suppose there will be lots of reasons for it. Elizabeth was talking earlier on, they're 15 years looking at diabetes and it's now getting there. Venipuncture and cannulation is new. So, you're seeing here, but I suppose it's important for us to measure and make sure that we actually are keeping an eye on it. So here we have, just 52% are actually certified in relation to cannulation, but there was actually only 30% are actually certified after 3 months in relation to venipuncture. So it's just kind of something I think we need to measure as well what we're doing in relation to education and working collaboratively in relation to that. And that may be the reasons that often, and even yesterday we had a venipuncture and cannulation course, it's the number of assessors. So, it's a new course, although we have undergraduates coming up and it will change, but the number of assessors needs to increase. We also have, I suppose, if you're doing something like Portacats training, which is a competency-based training, you're looking at the number of courses you can physically manage or that clinical area can physically manage to assess within a year. So your numbers are quite low. You also have movement of staff, and we were talking about there earlier on in relation to, your older nurses who are very experienced, or your experienced nurses, doesn't need to be older, but you need to look at those because they're now moving. So we need those as well there in the clinical setting, which we've been talking about. Your cohort of patients, if you're doing suprapubic catheter changes, this is actually, because of our geographical area, we're not the same as Dublin. So we actually will find it very, very difficult to maintain that competence so that you can have two people working from different areas within public health to actually come together to do assessments. So there's all of those challenges that we encounter in relation to being in Cork and Kerry. Okay, so I suppose it's very important to look at that. I suppose we've spoken earlier on about the QQI level 5 courses, and we do have a full healthcare assistant programme in relation to Health Service Skills Award, and we do the HCA QQI Activities of the Living Care model as well, and we will be introducing a number of QQI level 8 programmes. Now these, I suppose, haven't been approved as yet, but the comprehensive health assessment is hoping to be approved later on in the year. And we do have a number of modules, the pain module and vascular module, and it's helping nurses within the clinical setting where maybe there isn't a speciality. So there mightn't be a speciality, but actually supporting them when patients do come through to their particular areas. And also we have the older national overseas nurses working in older person services and the diabetes self-care management education programme in the Mercy. I suppose this is our final slide, but it's really looking at working collaboratively and looking at ways of how we can improve in every aspect, because at the end of the day, it is for the patient. So it has to be the patient and safety in relation to the patient and effective patient-centred care. So I suppose we've been talking about collaboration earlier on, mental health programmes, that general nurses with mental health programmes, intellectual disabilities, working together. And that's, I suppose, collaboration, and that's what we're here today. And now we're all going to collaborate with the tea. Thank you.
So there may be a number of questions here, but I think we're going to defer those until after tea break. Just let people get a coffee break, and then we'll come back. So if we can keep that to about 15 minutes, I know that's quite short, but we want to sort of maybe allow for as much time as possible in the second half. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Could I ask you to take your seats, please? It's lovely to see you all interacting and engaging. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to continue over lunch. Sheila, call in there, Colin.
Yeah, okay. You want your calling or not?
Yeah, we'll start the session. Yeah.
Okay, can we just let's get back into our sort of seats? Okay, everybody. Okay, so just want to follow up after that last session about education, and just say that was peppered throughout, and Roisin mentions it, but you know, one of the things that the NMBI haven't progressed and hasn't been commenced in the legislation is that we will be expecting in the relatively near future to ask nurses and midwives to evidence that they have, or to at least suggest that they have maintained their competence. And we're looking at ways of being proportionate about that. We're looking at all sorts of imaginative ways. One of them is that we feel that the big employers, i.e. the HSE, spend huge amounts of money, and this has all been evidenced this morning, in mitigating risk and maintaining competence and being really targeted at the individual registrants. So there is a sort of developing framework underway where we would accept that if you've got a very good employer, that they will be assisting you in that, and therefore we will be scrutinising the employees in that environment less, and the PDP totally ties into that, and we've been working with Carmel and Deirdre on that. So and then of course people who are sitting beyond the HSE and the big employers, i.e. maybe, you know, sole traders, self-employed people in more isolated positions, the scrutiny maybe would be more on them about just making sure that they have had the opportunity to get whatever training they need to make sure that they're within their code and scope. So it all ties together, all of this, all of the fact that the NMBI is connected, and you know, we engage a lot, maybe more than our board would like, in relation to recognising courses. But you can see, you can hear it peppered through everything that's been said this morning about the credibility of the NMBI endorsement. So, so is there any questions very briefly before we move on, or we can do, like, if there's anything comes into people's heads towards the end of the day, you can raise it, but just is there any questions in relation to, yes indeed, to this morning's session here with the ladies and Dan?
I'm a clinical placement coordinator at University Hospital Kerry, and I just want to ask a little bit in relation to the 6-day programme for new graduates. Have you done it on to evaluate, or have you noticed any difference in retention? Because I think it would be very, very positive thing going forward. Thank you for that question. Again, I guess it is relatively new, as you mentioned. Yeah. So it is a relatively new initiative, all right, and it is going to be part of a research project actually. We have got our research officer on board who will actually gather the data. So anecdotally it appears quite beneficial. Which I guess, you know, you're looking for the real facts and the evidence, so I guess the results of the research study will tell us that. So we're going to have to wait. It'll take a few groups going through before we really get that sense. But definitely the feedback is extremely positive. It's supporting young registered, you know, and it's even going to get us a shot.
Okay, this lady here. Oh, well, go to the gentleman when you're closer.
It's just a comment really. When I was taking the call back to Kerry Director of School and Kerry Legal Health Services, just with regards to continuous qualification there as well. A great initiative that was with the committee coming together following the research, and it's been a great way to develop our education and develop our knowledge base across Cork Kerry within Health and IT. And also, I suppose, just to recommend work with the CNME in building education following incidents and learning from incidents. I think that can't be underscored how you can access education and develop people's knowledge within in the forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's a lady over here. Yeah, in the green. Miss Ag.
I suppose my question is probably with Sheila, it's around the whole area of integrated healthcare and transformation, I suppose, and supporting nurses and midwives around the whole digital competency piece and the undergraduates. Just wondering if there's any developments in terms of the OB and.
Thank you. I can't stay with the post. Lovely. How are you? Yeah, I suppose there are so many projects ongoing in relation to digital healthcare, and we talked about this ever-changing healthcare that we have, and there's a lot of those with capabilities within digital. And I suppose the ORMSD did publish the digital capabilities framework, and then we have the digital roadmap, and there will be work ongoing through the ORMSD with Loretta Brogan and her colleagues and the Digital Health Office. There is the expert review body on nursing and midwifery also work through the Department of Health, and many of our colleagues are sitting on the strands of those to develop. And one of those is digital health and digital technologies. So work is really underway there. And then we had through the NMBI for the undergraduates, we had the publication. You probably talk more about that, Sheila, Louise, or Carol, in relation to the undergraduate program for digital. But yeah, nurses and midwives, some people need to get further education to support them. And we're very much waiting now to see what comes out of the ERB and following our roadmap from ORMSD as well.
Okay. This girl here just.
Patricia, can I ask, currently from a geographical perspective, I understand there's just one postgraduate programme in Ireland for mental health. Is there any plans to develop that so there will be something in the south for people who are interested?
Well, again, and this is not a Pontius Pilate moment, but we are the regulators, so we have to have the universities and the education bodies have to propose, and they Louise, you might want to come in here, but they have to work out, is there a market? And then, of course, Carmel's here too, and in some scenarios, if it's sponsored or if there's an enthusiasm at a policy level, you know, the universities get to hear that and they'll soon develop a proposal. So it's a sort of a circular argument. We'll certainly approve courses if they come to us, but we can't make them come.
So, and again, it's profiling through the local joint working groups with your HEI, whether it's UCC or the Munster Technological University, with regards to putting forward a business case, a rationale, identifying service need, and you know, on our agenda at every local joint working group is what's on offer, what do we need to be offering, where do we need to build, where are the trends emerging. So I see Dawn in the room and Geraldine is here today. So it's very much that whole partnership of pushing it on the agenda and developing it. You know, we've identified gerontology, for example, in the Northwest. It didn't make sense for us in Letterkenny to go ahead, so we're now collaborating with Donegal, Sligo and Mayo to do a joint delivery. So there's probably opportunity for Cork and Kerry and the different working groups and partnership to develop programs. But that is the place for it to start, local joint working group and pushing forward. And it's so important that you actually, you know, get it on the agenda for development, because there are areas that are prolific with regards to the delivery of courses, but there are emerging areas, particularly in CAMS, particularly in specialism, that we really need to address if we're going to be able to deliver so much care and all of what's expected of us. You know, so local joint working group and your local HEIs is the best place to start, definitely. And then it comes down to the Carolyn and the committee to credit, which is usually the easy part, because all the heavy lifting is done, isn't it?
Carmel, do you want to add to that?
Yes, and just say that the place to start is with the local joint working group, because you know it has to be an identified service need. And then just to fast forward and to say that funding is obviously available to our nurses and midwives and Section 98 nurses and midwives for postgraduate education. And I do think that even though programs may not be immediately available in the locality, there's no need to, you know, say, oh gosh, we can't have it why not collaborate across services, across other HEIs, and work to ensure that where there is a service need, we need to be working together to meet that service need. But that just needs to be brought to the attention of the right people to make sure that it is progressed. And that's the one thing is, oftentimes these need to be highlighted at the local joint working groups, at steering groups, to the key stakeholders, to make sure that they are pushed and that they do meet service needs.
And that just remind me of the consortium work that I get in there. There's a consortium of polytechnic universities where we've actually jointly delivered and validated, so with the Masters in Professional Nursing. So there'll be no reason why a mental health registrant couldn't apply to do the professional nursing one, albeit take different specialist strands or relevant modules, but it would actually profile them for an ANP. So and with hybrid and blended learning, it doesn't matter whether you're in Donegal or Dingle or Dublin now, because you have a hybrid approach. So it's important just to say that there's lots of opportunities emerging, and our consortium is strong. It's not right down success in that. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to go over to this side? I see hands up here.
Yeah, Martin Milton, there's Practise Development, coordinated with Kerry Mental Service. First of all, to thank the group for giving such a fine presentation, and there's a lot of exchange of ideas and I can take away with, which is a really good indicator. But my focus would be on Gillian and Jen and their presentation for the mental health on plan. I remember being at a conference one time in Hospital and said we were the poor cousins within the healthcare service. So it's lovely to see Gillian and Jen promoting the mental health nurse tutoring within the CNME. So my question to them is what processes or opportunities or maybe challenges have been faced by developing and establishing their role within the nurse practice or nurse tutor within the CNME.
Dan reckons that his presence alone seems to be an attraction.
Sorry, I'm an endangered species.
But that's a market employee.
That's it, totally, and gets me out of most trouble. I suppose it's very rare that mental health nurses, general nurses, and midwives work all together in one team. Sorry, that's my voice is very loud anyway. So, it's very rare that we all work in the same team. You know, we work in our own services and referral pathways. You know, it's very rare that we work together. You know, specialist perinatal would be another example, I think, and liaison services and A&E. But I suppose what I found over the 2 years of developing the post is that we've educated each other on the team. That you know, general nurses, my colleagues have come to me and said, "Well, why do you do it this way, or why don't you?" You know, and vice versa. And has been a very useful tool for educating each other on our respective services and how we work together. And I suppose from my own CNE, like I work with the CNE CUH, I serve 700 mental health nurses across Cork. Most of the CNE is focused on hospital-based settings in CUH, St. Finbarr's and in Mallow General Hospital. I look the absolute opposite direction. I look in the community. 90% of my staff that I serve are in the community. So it kind of gives that blend of working together and learning and exchange. And I do have to commend Elizabeth and Eileen Kelly, my own line manager, for giving us the flexibility and autonomy to do what we do with our service. Because mental health works differently. We've always worked a bit odd. And they have given us the autonomy to do that. And with the local committees and the support of the NMPDU, without that support, it wouldn't have been possible to serve the needs that we need. So it's kind of been an education process. I remember we spent one Christmas party discussing mental health and terminology. Sad lives we lead, but it's that exchange of views, or that I can pick up the phone to my colleagues and go, there's an issue about physical health, can I get that expertise, and vice versa. So I supported paediatric nurses a couple of months back, or a couple of years back now nearly, and about how to deal with challenging behaviour and people pushing boundaries and things like that. So it's that exchange of views and that perspectives in care, because I work around a discipline in nursing, it's a very different perspective on care. If we walk into a mental health unit, we work very differently to our other colleagues, because our philosophy of care, our needs of our service users are different, and giving that flavour to my colleagues and me learning from them more importantly has been very important.
Okay, thank you, Dan. This is the last question, because we need to move on, because there's a couple more sort of big sessions here. Lady at the back.
Thanks, I'm Helen Sweeney, Director of Public Health Nursing. I just want to say that we have a student with us at the moment from the Integrated Graduate Rotational Programme, and it's our first student on that integrated programme, and I think it really is the way forward. And we're delighted to have the student. And it's putting the focus on psychology care and putting the focus on the community. And we never before thought we could have a nurse come straight out from training and be ready to work in the community. And actually it has taught us that they can, and they're very, very good. So I really hope that we will continue with this program.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, a couple of things I want to say here, and that is that Carmel, when we've been out the last 2 days, we have heard about how much respect there is for the investment in the training and the CNMEs. So as I said, you know, and worked in government over the years, sometimes when things are silent and working well, actually then they take the money away. And then nobody notices, or everybody goes mad, but the actual fault lines don't appear for a few years. So this is a really good model. It's local, it's empathetic to the needs, it's agile. So it is really important that you know, the funding remains. And I know you'd obviously be a fan of that, but it's just important, and we'll be saying that back into the HSE, that, you know, this is a really good model, so don't tamper with it. So, and then to introduce Carolyn. So last year when we were out and about, we heard and we listened. People said that there was an awful lot of stress in the system, that people felt under pressure, and this might have been one of the reasons for sort of significant exodus. So we're trying to build that into this year's programme. So Carolyn's going to talk about health and wellbeing. And then the next session is in fitness to practice. And just to save time, I'll introduce. So fitness to practice is, of course, the dark space of the regulator. And you know, people would have said to me when I arrived there, that's all that everybody ever thought. They only took your €100 and then fitness to practice. So again, we need to take the mistake out of that. And whenever we go out and say we want to talk about FTP, there's always a huge interest. So we thought we'd build it into this programme. So we'll have Jan here to talk about the process of the actual sort of administrative process of fitness to practice and how you can connect with it, and how we are trying to meet registrants and management halfway in that process, and trying to think how we make it easier for you if you are a manager, if you are the registrant, or if you're a witness in a process. So I'll just let them, so it'll flow from here, okay, Carolyn?
Great. Thank you, Sheila, for that introduction. So as Sheila has said, last year, one of the overriding themes that came from our conversations with the registrants and the universities was the well-being of staff and how stressed people were. We were just coming out of COVID, and it was really a very hot topic. So we decided a year on, it was really important to kind of do another check-in and to see, you know, well, how are people doing now, and how are the services doing now, and how are the individuals doing now? So that's why we've put in just a short little section here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of frame it a little bit for us all, just to get us into the mindset of what we mean by health and well-being. And then really it's about opening it up to the floor and giving you guys an opportunity to kind of maybe just reflect on where are you and your colleagues now, and, you know, is there anything that's going on within your services or within your settings that you'd like to share, or any solutions or ideas or just major challenges that you feel, you know, we all need to be aware of. So we'll see how we go. So I suppose just to frame it for us, initially to give us a reminder really of where we are with this. So as per the World Health Organization, well-being is a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being, and not merely an absence of disease. So again, this is a definition that I really like, because again, it pushes the emphasis on the positivity of it, and that, you know, as nurses and midwives, well, nurses in particular, we tend to go looking for the problems and the deterioration, and we look for the risks, and we're constantly thinking, what's the worst case scenario? Whereas actually what we need to do when we're talking about well-being and health is reframe that and try and think, well, actually, you know, in relation to ourselves and how we are, we need to take it from a very positive slant. And it's interesting, you know, with the COVID and all the rest, it's as if health and well-being has become the new buzz thing, and it's the new thing, and everybody's talking about it as if it's just been invented. And when I looked back into this, actually, it's been around since ancient Greek and Roman times and ancient Greek and Roman philosophy.
And one of the first people to talk about this, and they weren't in nursing or medicine, was Aristippus. So about 450 years before Christ, this great ancient Greek philosopher came up with this idea of well-being. And his kind of thoughts on that was that it was we all needed to find pleasure and avoid pain. So he created hedonism. So that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, about 100 years later, we had a bit of progress, and then we had Aristotle, and we all would have heard of him. So again, another very famous ancient Greek philosopher, and this one, I think, very much speaks more to the professions than the evolution of thinking, where it was about well-being is in the origins of virtuousness and purposeful living and the psychological well-being and the positive pursuits of goals and higher purpose. So for us as professionals, we're like, yeah, that sits with us a little bit better than the hedonism, the whole virtuous and, altruism and, going and pushing forward. And then the third piece that really in the last 100 or so years is the modern thought on it, is around that social well-being. And I think this is really resonating with people nowadays, and I think that is much more holistic in an approach for what modern society is about. And it shows that health and well-being it's really multifaceted, it's very complicated, and it's about your context. So I think that's where the World Health Organization has really captured in their definition of what it means to have well-being. So it's a physical, a mental, and a social aspect to our lives, rather than just an absence of disease. So within our professional lives, we are aware, it's a topic that's always there. It hasn't gone away, has been there. It's interesting when you talk about crises in healthcare and staff and how bad things are. People will often remind you, well, back in the 80s, it was just as bad. And there was just as many trolleys and there was just as much pressure and all the rest. So it's not as if it has gone away, but it is different nowadays. I think the stresses and the pressures on the individuals within health and healthcare are different. So I think we do need to be cognizant of that. And I'm glad to say that there's more recognition that well-being is important. You can't just get on with it, which we were told back in the day, that we do need to try and address it and have it up there as important, because the INMO did their well-being survey there in this year in 2023, and they published their results. And what they found was that 94% of nurses and midwives say that the work is negatively impacting their psychological well-being. So that's pretty much everybody. So it is rife within the health sector, and it's rife within our professions that, our well-being is being impacted by our work. So we need to address that if we are going to try and work on that progression and that retention piece that we're always talking about. How do we crack the nut of retention? Well-being is right up there. And I'm glad to see actually within the HSE, there is a huge amount of money and resources that has recently, in the last few years, gone into this area, and posts that have gone into supporting people. So that, I think, we will see the benefits coming out of it on the far side. So for me, to look at well-being, there's some really nice research that's been done looking at it within nursing, and I will include my midwifery colleagues if they don't mind, because we do work very aligned together. So there was a concept analysis done just last year by a group of American researchers across the States, and they have defined now what nursing work well-being is. And I think that's important. If we're trying to understand what it is and how we can fix it, we need to know what a definition. So their definition, through a big content analysis consensus work, was a nurse's positive evaluation of oneself and one's contribution to the work of nursing, allowing for the nurse to be the best possible at any given point in time, with the ability to adapt and to overcome adversity to the extent possible. So again, it's all about possible, what's within our gift, what's the possibility. It's about being able to reflect and evaluate how are we doing with ourselves and our contribution to our work, and to be the best we possibly can, but that, to give ourselves a bit of latitude as well. There's only so much we can do on any given day. And I think this is important then. Nurses' well-being requires that basic and higher level needs are met at both the individual, organisational and community levels. And I think there's not a professional in the room that wouldn't have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that's ingrained in us from first year on. So again, it talks to that. We need our basics met first before we can move up that food chain to self-actualisation and being well within ourselves. So that's that safety element, really, really important. And we're all aware within our workplaces that it's that psychological safety and physical safety. We need to get that right first, and then we can work on the better pieces. So if we look into what they came up with, their attributes for well-being for the individual, what you would generally expect: happiness, satisfaction, optimism, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. That's a good one in nursing. We're very harsh on each other and ourselves. So I liked to see that in the list. And then of sound body and spirit. But I love the middle piece here. And that's kind of speaks to kind of more the senior members within the audience from a position perspective, but also within our professions. Organisationally and as a community, we can do things. So the attributes of well-being within an organisation and community is that there's teamwork, a sense of mission, pride in our work, and social integration. I think that's really important for us all to reflect on that element, because that's something we can do. We can work on that. We can focus on this. And why is it important? Because there are consequences. If we can get these things right, if the individual and then the organisation and the community can work on getting positive health and well-being, we can improve resilience, collegial relationships, continued growth and development, empowerment, purposeful work, and physical and mental health. So this is the holy grail, as far as I'm concerned, as to a good place to work. So I think if we can recognise what well-being looks like, know what the attributes are, and then what we could potentially achieve, I think it gives us more of an impetus and a drive to try and focus on it, put our resources into it, and push forward. So there's one other piece of research that I think would be handy for people to maybe, I'm sure some of you in the audience may have already had a look at this. So it's the Future of Nursing 2020 to 2023, Charting a Path to Achieve Health Equity. And it was published there in 2021. And it's by the Academy of Science, Engineering and Medicine, the National Academy. And it's a huge, big American organisation who have written, and it's only 464 pages. So don't worry, bedtime reading, you will never have a problem with insomnia again. But I would direct you to chapter 10. Skip forward if you want to go towards the bit on health and well-being. But there are some other good chapters. So within that piece, I've synopsized for you. I won't go through the other 463 pages. What they would say: for nurses to address the many social determinants that influence health, from housing to violence to poor air quality, they must first feel healthy, well, and supported themselves. This makes so much common sense, but I think sometimes common sense isn't always prolific. So it's really important that we just take that in and recognize it. And now we know it's research and it's evidence-based, so we can use this. And policymakers, employers of nurses, nursing schools, nursing leaders, professional associations, and nurses themselves all have a role to ensure well-being of the workforce. So I think that's basically telling us all we need to do it as a community, as a professional body, and as a group of people who want to get the best out of everybody. We want to do the best for our patients, and it's always focusing on the patients. But as this tells us, we need to focus on ourselves and supporting and minding ourselves first before we can then help everybody else. And where are the areas that we need to look at? And this, as you say, looks common sense. To improve the health of nurses, there's a wide variety of targets that we need to go for. Physically, our activity, our diet and our sleep. And we all know we're the worst for it. You'll give the greatest advice to the patient and the service user, and then you'll run to the canteen, grab a plate of chips and run back with indigestion. You know what I mean? So I think we sometimes we maybe need to think of our own advice and maybe internalize it a wee bit, but that can be hard. Substance use also, to keep an eye on it. So nurses and midwives have the same incidence of substance abuse as the general population, but the issue for us is access. We have greater access, so we can actually use stronger substances much easier and get into more trouble. And Jan, I think, will be able to tip into some of this as to what are the consequences then of those. Resilience is another one, and again, there's a piece of research coming out through the Magnet research piece where they're kind of saying resilience is really important, but if you tell the nurse or the midwife again that, you know, the answer to health and well-being is we'll give you a resilience course, they'll hit you, because they are sick of people telling them, oh, just do a resilience course and you feel better. And because people feel it's a bit condescending, that we're sort of saying, listen, you know, just do a course and you'll be fine. And they're going, well, look, there's one nurse for 22 patients, I'm not fine. You know what I mean? So we kind of need that balance of the reality of supporting the individuals in the workplace and then also supporting the health and well-being. Mental health, and as our colleagues here would say, they are very important and this part of our life. And it's not just mental health for the mental health professionals anymore. Mental health is for everybody. And I think we, in certainly within that general sense, need to learn so much from our mental health colleagues, the same way as Dan said, he's learning from our general colleagues. So again, I think we all need to do a bit more collaboration and integration together. Ethical competence. And again, that's really, really important. Our code of conduct is out there. If I asked anybody to name the 5 themes in the principles in the code of conduct, I wouldn't want to know the percentage of people who get that right, so I won't ask. But just to say that actually we're doing a really nice piece of work at the moment, and it'll be out for public consultation before Christmas, on integrating the code of conduct and ethics with the scope of practice, because the two of them are supposed to be used hand in hand. And the scope is here, and the code is like a waffle. Yeah, I'll read that later, or I'll read it when I get into trouble, or if there's a complaint or something. So we're going to try and make it a little bit more user-friendly. And I think this is the difference now in this generation. We need to target incivility, bullying, and workplace violence. That is absolutely a huge element of nowadays and this current professional practice life. Incivility to each other. And I actually hate the phrase, but I hear it a lot. We eat our young. And again, you see the young nurses just being demoralized sometimes because some of the older nurses are just too tired, and they're just like, I've been here, done this 20 million times, and you're asking the same silly question, and they don't have the time or the energy because everybody's so busy. So again, it's just trying to take a step back and go, God, I was day one nurse myself one day, and I just forgot how hard it is not knowing where the bathroom is, don't mind how to do check out control drugs. And then we have racism, prejudice, and discrimination. So again, this is a huge element. We know now that our nursing and midwifery workforce is very diverse, and that is a good thing for nursing. We don't want the groupthink. We want different thoughts and minds and perspectives to help us grow and improve our profession. But also, our population is diverse now, and it's very different. So we need to remind ourselves and encourage and educate ourselves on what cultural sensitivities are all about. And it's really important that we don't just play lip service to this, that we actually take it really, really serious. So they're the main elements. So what I would like to do is just maybe open it up to the floor for the next 10 minutes to kind of see, well, what do you think now, a year later on from the pandemic, which we know some of us have friends and colleagues that are currently out with COVID. It's still there, but thank God we're living with it. So from yourselves, is there anybody who would like to talk about how you're addressing health and well-being? What is the state of your service or yourself? And is there any good initiatives or solutions that you may have or that you'd like to share with the audience? And maybe I might start with Sandra, if you don't mind.
Well, I suppose just
Priscilla.
Former tertiary years in Ireland South, where the courses are going out of quite one trim, and I suppose what that deals with is trauma risk management, and it's evidence-based, and what it means is after a serious event that there will be someone on site for you to speak to within 72 hours of the event, and these staff members are part of our team. So there'll be 8 staff trained within the directorate through each of the areas, and it's kind of like peer support, and I suppose this is an area where we need a lot of support, and there's a lot of trauma, stress that can be long-lasting for some people or a short event for others, and I think this is something that we spotted, and I suppose got support. Dr. Colin Cormack, she the psychologist that is assigned to the Ireland South, and we're really looking forward to it starting in September.
Very good.
The event that we're hoping to roll it out all over the Ireland South directorate, and with something we're coming at wider there as well. So evidence-based and getting up to this shown to
Brilliant. Great initiative. Sylvie, any other thoughts or questions there?
Hi, my name is Deirdre Moss. I'm in for gynecology. And just to mention kind of a positive note that I'm part of the ANP National Group. 18th of October is World Menopause Day, and we're just hopefully trying to initiate where we will present to staff information about menopause, and it won't be kind of writing prescriptions or personal consultations, but really just opening up the conversation, trying to embed it into the culture of, working life, and hopefully it may well, give benefits that staff may, not leave work because they're not sleeping. This is a serious kind of cycle of events, and it's challenging for women when we get to a certain age, and it's really just supporting them. And thankfully, from my point of view, when I did come up with the idea, it was supported by Sandra, my line manager, and the hospital management. And I'm looking forward to the day, and I just want to share the date with you, the 18th of October. In fact, October itself is World Menopause Month, but I felt, it might be wise to start with a day.
I love that. So the challenge has been put out there now. We have one World Menopause Day, so we want to see now what else happens in the region. And
University Hospital Practise Centre, we had a morning. We had a morning from 8 to 2, giving presentations and had various different specialists come in and talk, and basically we had it in our auditorium, and there was a huge turnout. And we intend to repeat it again next year. It's our welfare officer that had initiated it, and was a welfare group that we were not just opened up to nurses, it was opened up to the whole of the hospital. But as I said, very well attended, and it was an excellent morning. Thank you.
Brilliant.
I'm Gina O'Connor. I'm a clinical placement coordinator with the Kerry Mental Health Services, and I suppose it's just again to acknowledge the wellbeing of staff and the raw scheme, the funding for the wellness at work scheme. I suppose the nurse practice team would have coordinated it or applied for that funding for the internship program last year, and to take them kind of on a team building day. And I suppose again it was just to acknowledge their challenges during being a student during COVID, and just to kind of bring on the teamwork side of things as well. So I suppose it was a very beneficial day. We went to Dingle and we did there was yoga, there was activities on the beach, there was motivating speech, and it just really, like, I suppose it really kind of like was highlighted, I suppose, they're kind of like they weren't given that time to kind of, I suppose, work together or meet that much because they weren't in college or just to see the benefits of it. And I suppose it's just something that going forward is it's a very good funding to apply for staff.
Brilliant, brilliant. It's lovely to see the students being looked after.
In addition to all of that, I would like to see the introduction of, an area in all our programs actually right across the field, undergraduate and postgraduate continuing education on human factors and how they impact on our everyday working lives. Excuse me. And it doesn't have to be a huge chunk of it, but it's definitely an identified risk factor. Now, if we don't begin to address those, we leave nurses out there feeling, oh, you can't cope, you're not fit for the job. And it's such an important area. Like, there's a wealth of knowledge and expertise out there on that whole area. And I really do think we need to address that and all that more, bring it into all our healthcare programs, not just for nursing, right across the board for all disciplines. Because the common problems are affecting all of us in terms of how we cope. And equally, I suppose, just before I finish, I feel there's another group of people that we often leave behind, people with neurodiversity, members of our workforce. And I'm not so sure our environment is very supportive, whatever their needs are. And we need to take that on board for retention of staff. And just a few thoughts.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Completely agree.
Can I just mention ATU has significantly collaborated with the University of Ulster in the context of mental health and well-being of students, not just nursing students, but all undergraduates, as that later earlier. This has been a huge fallout of the pandemic, so we've secured significant funding in this area. We've published, we've disseminated directly into suicide and pre-suicide, whereby these areas of mental health and well-being are not identified, and we then secured HEA funding to look at the neurodivergent and the neurodiverse needs of our undergraduate students across all disciplines. And we've just secured $500,000 through the IRC with ATU and UU, again, to work on an all-Ireland shared approach. So the ethos and the aims and objectives of this funded research piece is to look at gathering all of the different initiatives we're doing and has setting up a toolbox as such so that we can implement it out. So I think it's a really emerging area, and it's great to see that it's been back from a research funding point of view. And obviously I have a great stakeholder to be able to collaborate nationally, whether it's in Dublin, Dingle or Donegal, or indeed Derry. So it's a fantastic initiative, but you're absolutely right, the neurodiverse and the neurodivergent student, whether they're undergraduate or postgraduate, are continuing to rise. I'm sure Dawn and other educational additional needs, ADHD, dyslexia, it's a common theme in so much of our students and our registrants. So just to add that in.
Brilliant. Final comment.
Hi, I'm
Siobhan.
Working in a nurse tutor university, but in a previous life last year I was theatre manager in Dublin in one of the hospitals. So I suppose, like, I'm thinking back during COVID, like the first wave was very controlled. You know, everybody was in fight mode. Everybody was, kumbaya. It was almost for us anyway. I suppose, theatre services in particular actually lessened, and there wasn't as much stress as we anticipated. But kind of when the stress came in, it was post that. I think 6 months later, the public weren't clapping for the nurses anymore, and they had kind of enough of, I suppose, the upheaval and what was going on. But I think for me at the time, when I look back, that period was very tough because suddenly, anybody that was a contact of, a home relative couldn't come to work. So you were trying to manage twice the amount of activity, twice the amount of activity, and a quarter of your staffing might be on every day. And I do think that a lot of people had a lot of stress, after that. But for me, our manager at the time, my director of nursing, she insisted that all of our managers do a 6-week program on wellbeing. And I actually was thinking to myself, I'm too busy to do that, I'll leave it off to it. I was too busy to do that. But I suppose, and there's lots of courses out there. I just think the one I did was called Mind Shift. It was online. It was for 6 weeks, but it was a brilliant initiative because I suppose what it did was the first day I stupidly went into the office with another colleague to do the course, and of course I got a knock on the door and consultant was trying to add on a laparotomy in the middle of me trying to do this wellness course. So after that, the guy in charge of the course was like, all you nurses need to get out of this hospital to do the course or whatever. But we took kind of 6 weeks for ourselves, and it was just really good. It was all about prioritising your day, not being email reactive. And I just think, you know, I suppose we probably have a responsibility when we are in healthcare settings to provide that service for our staff, that it's not just a day and a kind of a, I suppose, I don't want to say a willy-nilly thing, but just that there is thoughts around there being an extensive wellbeing programme that you must attend and you must not be in the building when you do it. And for me, it was absolutely brilliant, and I just think any director of nursing here have a look into that for your staff that are on the ground, because there's a lot of bad memories post-COVID that people are carrying, and certainly that really helped me.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so just to sum up, to thank everybody for sharing the really brilliant things, and I think it's really encouraging for me to see, because I would believe that COVID had its troubles, but the whole wellbeing thing became quite important as part of that. We need to seize this opportunity and keep it, and keep the resources and keep the focus, because it's not an option. It's necessary. You know, if we want to keep our staff well and able to provide excellent care for others, we ourselves need to mind ourselves, and we need to do it as a community, and that's our opportunity. It's there now, the focus is on it, the funding is there, let's use it. And as you say, not do it in the office when there's people knocking on the door and your mind is going back and forward. It's actually taking a proper focus and time out to do it, and that way we'll get the benefit. But I say it's wonderful to see all the great initiatives that are happening, and it's great. I just hopefully you'll continue to share and make this more mainstream and sustainable, because that we know burnout is attached to well-being, and well-being is attached to burnout, and they're on that continuum. And all we hear about is that negativity of burnout, the stress, and it's a terrible profession to go into. And you see it on the news, certain people representing the profession are saying, oh, nurses are being bashed to death, and ED, they're getting trampled, and it's awful, and oh, you know, it's a terrible profession to go into, and there's women having babies on the street, and you know, it's desperate. Whereas you're kind of going, actually, do you know what, there is a good side to our professions. We need to get that voice there, we need to get that positivity there, because we need more people to come into our professions. And we're going to be approaching that menopause age, and we're going to need the health of the World Menopause Day and all of those things. And it's that continuum of our profession. You know, we start in our 20s and probably hopefully into our 60s, you know, we'll still be at it. And it's, if we're there to help and support our young, we need to have that well-being from start to finish. So thank you very much, everybody, for today. It's been a great talk, and hopefully food for thought.
Oh, what did I do?
Sorry. No, you're good.
No, it's okay.
I'll go.
While Sinead's helping me with my presentation, I'm just going to introduce myself. I've got the best slot of the day. You're all desperate now for lunch, and you're going to want to run away, so I'll be really quick. So my name is Jeanne Tarrant. I'm a fitness to practice officer, and by way of background, I am a nurse and a midwife. I have been there. I know exactly what you've done, maybe lots of years ago, but I do understand the pressures. So I'm going to go through fitness. My slides are going to look at our trends. I'm going to bring up two extremes in terms of case studies, and then I'm going to talk about our compassion project. You've already heard from our registration team, and Kathy-Ann talked about our numbers. So without further ado, So why do we have regulation? Regulation is about setting and upholding standards, and that's where you've got the education part of it. It's about protecting the public, and that's not just confined to our patients, it's us, ourselves, as registrants, as nurses and as midwives. And that's where regulation comes in. And it's about maintaining confidence in the professions of nursing and midwifery. So, how do we regulate? One of the things that we need in order to regulate are complaints. I'm going to show you a really, really short video, and then I'll go further in.
To protect the public, NMBI considers and investigates complaints about the fitness to practice of registered nurses and midwives. We receive complaints from members of the public, employers, healthcare professionals, patients and service users, and other nurses and midwives. Complaints can be made on a number of grounds, including professional misconduct, poor professional performance, non-compliance with a code of professional conduct, failure to comply with a condition, undertaking and or consent, and others outlined in the Nurses and Midwives Act 2011 as amended. If you are concerned about the behaviour, conduct, practice, or health of a registered nurse or midwife, or you are aware of an incident or incidents involving a nurse or midwife that may have compromised a patient's safety or the protection of the public, you can contact NMBI at complaints@nmbi.ie or write to us at EPC Division, Fitness to Practice Department, Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland, 18 to 20 Kerry Avenue, Blackrock, County Dublin. If you wish to make a complaint to NMBI about a registered nurse or midwife, please provide the full name of the registrant, their PIN number if known, and the specific allegations that you wish to complain about. The allegations that you wish to complain about must be directly attributable to the registrant you are complaining about. If you wish to make a complaint against more than one registrant, you must submit a separate complaint about them. NMBI cannot investigate complaints against doctors, healthcare assistants, or any professionals other than registered nurses and midwives. NMBI also cannot investigate complaints about the general provision of care provided by a healthcare facility, such as a hospital, nursing home, or other care centre. If you would like more information, please visit our website www.nmbi.ie to learn more.
So, I'm now going to go through a really quick overview of our process. So, I've heard of how complaints can be made to the NMBI, and that's what we call a referral to the NMBI. Once that complaint comes in, we've got a preliminary proceedings team, and they'll look at the complaint. The amended Act allows that team, with delegation or derogation from the CEO, because Sheila has the power to look at a complaint and determine whether that complaint is frivolous or vexatious. So that the team look at the complaints and triage the complaints. And you'll be surprised how many complaints can be frivolous and vexatious. Where there's a will, there's a way. And then it moves to our committee. So once the team decide that the committee now need to make a determination, it goes to our PPC committee, and they will look at the complaint and decide whether they need more information before they can make a decision. And sometimes that involves the registrant is obviously informed. The subject of the complaint will be informed that a complaint's made against them, and they'll be invited to give their views of the complaint. They may ask for further information from the complainant. They'll look at all that information and determine whether, based on what they have, they can say this registrant has no further case to answer, or actually there needs to be further investigation. If they decide there is further investigation, that's where my side of the house comes in, the Fitness to Practice Committee. Part of my role is working with our legal team to identify whether there's more information that we require. So the solicitors will go out and get witness statements where necessary. They'll get documentation from the complainant, things like policy documents, guidance documents. And then once we've got the case together, our committee will then invite the registrant, the subject of the complaint, to attend an inquiry, which is a hearing of the complaint. At the end of that process, the committee will determine whether or not the case, that the registrant, the subject of the complaint, has a case to answer. And if so, whether the facts are proven, and if they are, what sanctions, if any, that they need to impose. And they'll recommend these sanctions to the board. And it will then, the complaint will then arrive at board level. The board will take into account what the Fitness to Practice Committee, their recommended sanctions, and either accept the sanctions as they stand, decide that the sanctions are too lenient and increase those sanctions, or decide they're too harsh and reduce those sanctions. Some sanctions will have to be confirmed at the High Court, and that's the higher level sanctions, and one of those is cancellation. So I'm now going to give you some of our trends. It's very fancy, this. Now this slide, tells us the number of complaints that we've had since 2012, and that's with the new Act. You'll see that around about 2017, our number of complaints peaked. And the reason for that is prior to the Act, the new Act, the one we're working to at the moment, was enacted, members of the public could not make complaints. And by 2017, they understood they could make complaints, and we got all sorts of complaints coming through, including some that weren't actually applicable to nurses or midwives. And you'll see that after 2017, there is a drop-off, but we'll expect that and in 2023, we've got 51 complaints have come through so far. That number will probably go up a bit, because we're not at the end of the year yet. And I expect that over time, our average number of complaints will be between 50 to about 70 per year. That's about standard. So the next slide is quite a busy slide, and you'll see all those charts. Now, what I want you to focus on is the green number. And the green number tells us the number of complaints that have come through. And then if you look at the purple number, and that's the number of cases that having the complaints, they've looked at the complaint, the PPC the committee have looked at those complaints and decided that there's no further action to be taken. And those are the cases that the registrant will be informed, the complainant will be informed, and that's the end of it. Then I want you to look at the orange bar. Now that's a number of people that are then, having had the complaint looked at by the PPC, is referred to the Fitness to Practice Committee. Now, think about Cathy Ann told us what our the number of registrants. So if you look at it and put it into context, the number of people who will be referred, it's not that great, really, in the grand scheme of things. Now, I'm not good at maths, but I'm going to throw in a percentage, and I think, in my mind, it's less than 0.1%. It's less than 0.1% of the total register. Fascinating. I like numbers. So we're going to focus now just on what's happened this year so far. And the numbers are, as of the 29th of August this year, we've had 35 PPC decisions. About 40% of those decisions, no further action's been taken. And then about 51% of those have been referred to my side of the house. And they will have ongoing investigations, further information requested. One of the things that I want us to think about is what the amended Act, as of, and that amendment came in 2021, and we started applying it in January 22, is undertakings and consents. Prior to that date, a registrant, the subject of a complaint, could not offer undertakings not to repeat the conduct that has led to the complaint, and or consent to censure. With the amended Act, that can now take place earlier in the process. It means that there are some complaints that do not require further investigation or further action, but it's serious enough that it needs to be marked. And so that number in time, we expect, will go up. But I need to emphasize, not all complaints are appropriate for undertakings, but we expect to see that number go up. And I'll talk a little bit more about those numbers in my slides. So this slide is showing you the inquiry activity. This is where the hearing takes place. And you'll see that our peak time was 2022. And there are a number of reasons for that number of inquiries. One, with COVID, we couldn't actually do many inquiries, but we managed to pick up in 2022. As to date, and that date was the 31st of August in 23, we've had 24 inquiries over 45 days. You need to understand that our number of inquiries do not equal our number of days. And the reason for that is that some inquiries will take a shorter period and can conclude within a day, and some inquiries can take a bit longer. On average, our inquiries take about 2 days. Our longest inquiry to date is about 14 days. So, when I talk about undertakings, you need to understand this is in the legal context, and if undertakings are breached, there are consequences to not fulfilling the undertakings. So to date, we have had 7 complaints that have been concluded by means of undertaking at PPC stage. Now, as I said, I expect that as time goes on, the numbers of complaints that can be concluded with undertakings will happen much earlier in the PPC stage, and therefore that number will increase. Prior to January 22, people can give undertakings at inquiry stage, but this is much later on in the process, and we still take undertakings. And so since January of 22, we've only had 6 inquiries concluded by undertakings. I expect that over time, the number of undertakings that are done at inquiry stage will be a lot less, because anything that is suitable for undertakings will be done much, much earlier in the process. Now, you're probably asking, why do we want to do that? It's because, one, it does save time and money. It reduces stress on the registrant, and we do know that those registrants who are under the shadow of investigation at fitness to practice are less likely to work in clinical practice. They are stressed, they have a lot of pressure. So if we can conclude a complaint against a registrant earlier, they're more likely to return to practice. Now, in my previous life, I was a full-time officer, and I know there's some registrants that never, ever return to practice with the shadow. So my hope is that by having undertakings much earlier in the process, we save those people, they get back to practice, they have insight, they're unlikely to repeat the conduct, and we keep them in practice. So just to look at what kinds of sanctions can be imposed, as I said earlier, the ultimate sanction is cancellation. And in 22, we had 5, and to date, we have 2. We've had 2 cancellations. And the reasons for cancellations, the conduct has to be so bad that there is no alternative but to cancel that person's registration. Generally, when you look at the people who are cancelled, it tends to be on health grounds, people who are unwell, either physically or mentally, and they need help, and they'll get that help while they're not in practice. And after that, you've got your suspension and conditions can range from having some training in the area that led to the subject of the complaint. It could be agreeing not to work in that environment, so people, or even undertaking, say, if it's to do with maybe medicine management, having training around medicine management. If it's to do with controlled drugs and it's got a health element to the inquiry, it may be that they don't do anything with controlled drugs for a period of time until they're deemed safe to do that. Then you have censure and conditions, and censure is, in colloquial layman terms, it is a telling off, but it's much serious than that. And then again, conditions, censure, you could have a fine. To date, since 2022, we've had no admonishments or advice, and an admonishment is less than a censure. Okay, so I've talked about how stressful the process is, so what are we doing about it? So in November 21, one of our ex-board members, Martin Higgins, did a project for us, and his report said that the process is really stressful, it's adversarial because of what it is. So what can we do? And he says that what we should be doing is doing it quicker, undertakings, doing it smarter and explaining better. So as a team in the department, here are some of the things we're doing. We are trying to resolve cases much earlier in the PPC stage, and we're allowed to do that because the legislation has changed to enable us to do that. We are streamlining the inquiry process to avoid delays. So one of the things we do once we've concluded the investigation, we're trying to liaise with registrants and their reps early to see if we can fix inquiry hearing days sooner. We are developing feedback mechanisms. So one of the things that we try and do at the end of the inquiry process is to ask our witnesses, our complainants and the registrant themselves, how was it for you? What could we do differently to make it much smoother? We are trying to simplify our communication with registrants and witnesses and complainants. What the issue we have is every communication, written communication particularly, has to be framed in a legal way. We have to say why we're contacting them. We have to set out the act that it relates to, the section of the act it relates to. But one of the things we are keen to do, and we're doing, is to simplify that language and do it in plain English. And in fact, as a department, the whole department will be attending a plain English course in the next coming months. We are providing more information about the process and what to expect at inquiry, and that complaints video that you watched is the first of many to come through. We're expecting to have an inquiry process video out soon, and there'll be other videos and information things. And we're trying to make sure that this website, the part of their website that relates to fitness and practice, is easy to access, easy to understand, and set in plain English. We are providing lots of updates to our witnesses and trying to support the witnesses through the process. So whereas in the past, a witness to an issue would know that it's been referred because their organisation may tell them, and that will be the end of it. They don't hear anything until we write to them to say, oh, by the way, you need to come to an inquiry. What we're trying to do throughout the process is involve you or let you know what's going on. And as I said, we have updated and we continue to update our web content. And we are trying to increase engagement with stakeholders. So a few months ago, I had the pleasure of being invited to a hospital where I talked about the code and its application in practice. So I brought real live examples of cases that had appeared at Fitness to Practice and set it out to what it meant in code. And I hope, and we hope, to do more of that. And finally, we have got an emotional support care line. And this is a phone line that is available to anybody who's involved in the Fitness to Practice process. This involves any nurse, midwife, witness, complainant, or even an employee of the NMBI that's involved in the case. And it the care line has access to counsellors, who are able to provide support. They don't talk about the case. All they do is provide that emotional support that we know people require throughout this process. If the team at the care line identify that the person they're talking to requires further assistance, they will refer them to either their GP or other services. And within that team, they also have qualified counsellors the registrant or whoever's contacted them has access to some counselling sessions as well. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, but I know that we're set for questions. So I'm not going to take questions here because we're going into the wider question session. Thank you.
Okay, John, just then to, highlight the job of the board. So the board, obviously, there are 23 people on the board, and there are a number that are elected, and there are a number that are appointed, and there are a number that are registrants, and there are a number that are not. And the same in the FTP committee, which is about 33 people. And some of those are board members, and some of them are not. Some of them are lay, some of them are registrants. And then the PPC is only 11, so it would be slightly smaller and meets more regularly. So the Fitness to Practice Committee, we need to then create subcommittees to hear these cases, and the cases can go on longer than 2 days. There was one recently went on, I think, 12 days. So I'm sort of on a plea here that if you think you might be interested in some of this work, a pathway onto the board at sometimes is not just always just to go straight onto the board, but to go onto some of the committees that help us develop. And one of the very important ones is FTP. And then when so the case is heard and the evidence is put, and you have a lot of support if you're in that environment from legal advisors, which cost us a huge amount of money. It's a very litigious process, very highly skilled people working, top level barristers working on these cases, both from our side and on the other sides. But then it comes to the board, and Louise maybe will touch on this whenever she gets up, but it's a huge, big deal for the board to make a decision on somebody's future, And of course, the subcommittee of the Fitness to Practice Inquiry do hear the evidence, but ultimately it's the board and the board's credibility that's on the line in relation to putting that recommendation then onwards up in many cases to the High Court for approval. And also then the immediate suspensions. A huge issue about suspending somebody, removing their right to work in the profession that they're registered in. So it is something we don't take lightly. We spend an enormous amount of money on. We're trying to make it more efficient. We're trying to make it more compassionate and empathetic, but it is a very serious role that we have to undertake. And as I say, I'm advocating on behalf of the board that it's not to be taken lightly. But one of our audit recommendations was that we have to make clear to people about the amount of time commitment that's involved in being on the board, and I think that's a big issue. And again, I would say, think about this as being maybe a career opportunity for you, but also understand the time commitments. So we really do want to see fresh faces coming forward, and it's really great to have registrants because they're really rich in their ability to empathise and think things through, but it is a significant time commitment. Jan will also remind me that she made a pitch on Tuesday for expert witnesses, and we shall want that again. So some of you that are really skilled in your areas, we do need people to write independent, objective reports. So please identify yourselves if you think you could do that, because that's a really important role that we need to undertake.
And one thing that I would say that we're always desperately short of midwives and care of the older person. So anybody with those skills, please do come and talk to me, because we'd love to have you on board. It also saves the time it takes for the complaint to go from fitness to practice to inquiry. So many of the times we're actually waiting on an expert, trying to identify an expert, getting the report from an expert, and what we need from the expert is to give an opinion on the allegations. Because it may be likely that although the complaint appears serious on paper, an expert might say there is really nothing here, this is normal practice, and we could then allow that registrant to say, thanks very much, this is the end of the process for you. So it's really important that we do get more experts.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up now for final questions about any of the sessions, or indeed the Fitness to Practice one, and then Louise will come and close. Yes, yes. Thanks, Sandra. Hold on till we get your mic, if you don't mind.
And just a question in relation to sports, and I think same with Ireland's being so dependent and playing the Bible and as a social media influencing. Is there any kind of confidentiality clause or anything that can be signed there at that stage to take the step that we're either completely open social media still mentioning the name of the person and just that causes trauma that person can afterwards. So even though the page is essential to everything, so is there any advice?
The advice I'll say is that we do have the support line. That is because we can't give that emotional support. It's best that it's done by somebody who's independent, and this line is completely independent of our processes. We don't even know who's contacted. All we know are numbers at the end of the month, how many numbers contacted the service. So I'd say to anybody who is subject to complaint, where the complaint has been concluded and they feel under pressure, please get hold of that line. Now, one of the things that at Fitness to Practice is that the subject of the complaint and witnesses can ask the committee to anonymise their name or to hold the inquiry in private. Now, the default position is in public, and the committees tend to look favourably if it's requests for the name of the subject of the complaint to be anonymised. They may still hold the thing in public, and they will then give an order to people who are listening in that they cannot report on the person's name, and there are consequences if they do.
Now, you do have to make a case for that.
Yeah.
That's not just approved just because it's requested. You know, the inquiry, there's a default that it should be held in public, and that was sort of highlighted in the last version of the legislation. So you have to really make a very strong case. But if you're well represented, you know, that can be done. Okay, we've scared you all into submission.
Yeah. Now, look, one of the things I forgot to say, I did say I was going to give you two different things. We do know that a number of the complaints that come to us are what I would call low-level, ongoing competency issues, where you've tried to address these issues in-house, and it could happen over a number of months. And generally what we see that it's happened over a year or two, where programs have been put in place to support the individual, they're given training in-house, out-of-house, but yet they make either the same mistake over again or different mistakes. Now, sometimes it's really hard. You have HR who will support you, but you then think, well, what else can I do? I have real concerns about this individual. What I'm putting out to you is, if you are not sure what else you can do, pick up the phone, drop us an email. The PPC team are there to give advice about what you can do, whether it's a referral or what other things that should be done. So do contact us. So that's what I call the low-level ticking time bomb that nobody quite can get their hands on. Then you have the other extreme, and that's the Lucy Letbys of the world, where it happens and it goes boom. And for that sort of thing, we can convene our board really quickly. They have the power to suspend someone from practice immediately. It has to be confirmed by the High Court, but we can call an emergency meeting really, really quickly of the board to consider the factors. Now, the board may decide that it doesn't require suspension, but it requires that the individual gives an undertaking to remove themselves from that environment, or conditions are applied. And that's a legal position, and once they give their consent for an undertaking, they have to uphold that. Otherwise, it'll come back before the board and further decisions will be taken. So that's how we protect the public.
Okay.
Thanks, Raj. California, I'm just wondering, given the stress to the registrant of a referral to NMBI, is there anything that can be done in relation to penalties for those who make vexatious complaints from a member?
The problem is not everybody who makes a vexatious complaint is a registrant. In fact, most people who make vexatious complaints aren't registrants. I don't have the real figures, but I expect that as time goes by, registration are very lucky. They've got a live register. We've only recently digitised, but over time we'll be able to see what kinds of people are making those vexatious complaints. But just from my gut feeling and what I've seen, they don't tend to be registrants. So there is nothing we can do. The public have a right to make a complaint. They make their complaint, we look at it and address it, and if it needs to be, we stop it at that point, and that's the end of the matter.
Sorry, a follow-up question. Given that you determined that's a vexation complaint, then, are is the complainant written to say that?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
they are advised that it's not going to go any further. The registrant has a right to know that a complaint has been made against them, and so they will be advised that a complaint was made against them, but there is no further action. So they're aware of that.
Okay, then are there any other questions from the rest of today that anybody wants to raise at this point, or put out there, or proposals or great ideas that's going to transform the nursing workforce?
Thank you very much. It's been a lovely session all through the day. I remember all through the course of training, we're being told that when yes, that it will come very soon. You have to show your professional development.
Yeah.
And you have to show what courses you're doing before you can actually get the registration renewed.
Yes.
And I'm aware this is ongoing in other countries. So I'm just wondering how far more do we have to wait for that in Ireland? What is NMBI doing about that? Because, right across the board, the professional development of nurses, in order to maintain their competency, is becoming eminently necessary day in, day out.
Yeah. So I alluded to that earlier. I maybe used the wrong terminology or wasn't clear. So that section of our legislation has not yet been commenced. Now, that's our fault as well as the department's. And we are looking at how we go about that. But as I said, we want to make it as proportionate as possible. So when we're here today and hearing about all the resources that are poured into bottom up, locally based need training and PDPs and all the tools that are now in the system, our belief is that probably the big employers will be more than proactively investing to ensure that their staff's competence is maintained. But more than that, there is a requirement in the legislation for those employers to actually do that. And then you go further out into, as I say, people that are maybe in employment settings that are not as well resourced, and those people may find it difficult in getting, but there is a requirement for those employers to assist in ensuring that the competency is maintained. It's quite a complicated bit of legislation, just the way it's written. It's talking about everything. Everybody has to be doing this within 12 months of the progression of the legislation. So we're trying to come up with a logistical way to make this, to initiate this, maybe without the legislation being commenced, to ask people to confirm that they are maintaining their competence. That'll be probably done on the system, maybe not at the exact same time as annual renewal. So people get used to actually declaring that they are maintaining their competence. We'll give we'll give very clear guidelines as to what we think that might look like. They'll be clear, but they'll be expansive. There'll be many options, including reflective practice, etc. And then people will be expected to record that they are what they're doing and how they're maintaining their competence, and that should connect with the PDP for the HSE staff. But then it's about us then what our role is, and that would be some sort of an audit. And as I say, that audit will be determined by probably the employment setting. But as I say again, we don't want to make it scary or off-putting, because we believe many people and most people are maintaining their competence adequately because it's in your code. You're signing up to doing that already. But we do need to find a way to mobilise the legislation and to do it with everybody understanding what the parameters are. So in other words, it'll be voluntary initially. You'll be saying, yes, I'm confirming that I'm maintaining my competence, and we're telling you what you should collect, and we think you're doing it anyway, and you've got the PDPs, if you're working on the HSE, and then it will be then about probably 3 years down the line, we'll start actually auditing a number of people, and that will be determined more or less by your employment setting, the concentration of audit. Again, it'll cost us, so we have to be proportionate, because we are supposed to live within our, the €100 per registrant income. So we have to be smart about how we deploy the resources. Do we think there's a lot of bad behaviour going on? No. Do we think there's employers who maybe aren't letting their staff go? Yes. So it's actually about making sure that where a person is being compromised, and therefore the public is being compromised by the quality of care, we will then zoom in, and we will work with the employer to make the employer be supportive of the member of staff. So it's a slightly different way to go about it, but we hope to be able to bring more of that into the public domain in the near future. Is that okay? Does that answer your question? Okay, Louise, do you want to just maybe a few closing comments?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
And thank you. And I'm very mindful of pages of notes here, so we're never going to get through all my notes. But I think I'll have to start writing a book in terms of the series, because it's been so insightful and thought-provoking what's been shared today. And I just want to again congratulate and thank Elizabeth and the team from the CNME and their delivery, and the really positive vibe in the dialogue of the initiatives that's happening. So it's very, very evident in the south of Ireland, here in the Kingdom, and indeed in Cork, that the registrants, the nurses and midwives, are very, very well supported. But let's not forget about what it's all about, and it is all about the patient, and everything we do and everything we want to do should be patient focused and patient centred, and that is about public protection. So the pillars of us as a regulator are about regulation, registration, education, and it's so important that we all collectively, collaboratively and interdisciplinary, and it's another word that's been used very, very well and widespread throughout what we've talked. So, the initiatives that we've talked and shared individually and collectively is about future-proofing our profession of nursing and midwifery, and whether that's through recruitment, retention, but most of all reflection, and the importance of health and well-being, or mental health and well-being of ourselves. We can't pour from an empty cup. So taking that time, and I love that, the mind shift and taking the time to look after ourselves, that's so, so important. I just jotted down a few things in terms of the quality initiatives, and I know Dan and Jill and Bernie and Elizabeth and Fionnuala and Priscilla gave a huge insight. But, for me, the big thing was the needs analysis. Everything has to be, proofed. Going back to your local joint working, but putting together a business case of what you need and what you're, and if it isn't coming through in the needs analysis, Dan, why isn't it coming through and getting it on the agenda? But that interdisciplinary approach, mental health and ID, dual diagnosis is just such a phenomenon now, whether it's in midwifery, whether it's in intellectual disability services, or indeed mental health. Our service is being patient driven in everything we do. And then interesting that the mental health staff are talking about physical health, and the generalists are talking about mental health. So how everything is actually coming full circle. But there are challenges, and with challenges comes opportunities. We've heard about the spread, the geographical spread of getting from Cork to Kerry to whatever. We have it in Donegal and Sligo in the northwest. So how do we overcome that with the hybrid approach and simulation and all of that? The over-assessment of the student. How are we making life difficult for the preceptors and the CPCs? Why aren't we actually right touch and light touch getting our students through the system? And then, of course, the over 50s, the menopause, the 18th of October should be in all of our diaries. And we talked about Aristotle to Yeats lighting the fire to the tree of life. So we've poets, philosophers and artists. But at the end of the day, don't forget what Florence Nightingale said, and that infamous quote, we are never done learning from each other in what we do, how we do it, and how we can do it better. And I would also bring Benner in, because whether you're a new grad or whether you're starting out on your candidate register as a clinical specialist or an advanced or a CNM, it is a trajectory and it's a journey, and we should be able to shoulder up and pony up with each other and help each other along the line. And I don't like that quote either. I know Carolyn referred about eating our own young, but like, let's just think about this. So I hope this has given you as much food for thought as it has done I want to thank you all for coming here today, sharing your stories, sharing your initiatives, talking about, you know, the issues, the challenges, but most of all is actually taking the time out to come today and network. And blended is great and hybrid is great and online is great, but nothing beats being here, as they say in the GAA in Croke Park. So it has been wonderful. And I know you didn't get your opportunity on the Hogan stand, but you know what? Next year is another year for the championship. So, yeah. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you did have, whether it's a nugget of information, and please jot it down. What are you going to take back to your service or your team as an initiative or something that you might change? So safe journey to everybody. Thank you for coming, and Slán Abhaile. Okay. Best news ever. Before you go, you're being fed. So lunch is being served in the restaurant. In the restaurant. Okay. So for those that can join us, we'll go to the restaurant, and for everybody else, safe home. Thank you.